Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the third installment of Ace Attorney Analyzation, or 3A for short. In this video, I'm excited to tackle Trials and Tribulations, the third Ace Attorney game and the last game in the Phoenix Wright trilogy. You're probably used to me talking a bit about the previous Ace Attorney review at this point, and here I go again. So I'd like to talk about Ace Attorney Analyzation and where the review series stands now. After one of the most intense script and editing processes I've ever had, the Justice for All review was released on December 26th, 2016. It's been 11 months since that analysis. A disastrous week and a half of 7 separate 9-hour rendering failures until my friend Jay's Reviews stepped in to help. Would you believe it? But I almost quit on trying to upload the review altogether. It sounds shallow, but in the moment of frustration, on Christmas Day no less, I considered it. Well, to say getting the Justice for All review out was difficult is an understatement, but I am unbelievably happy with how it turned out. I think I nailed it. I said everything about the game that has been boiling inside me since Q1 of 2013. If I would do something differently, I would have elaborated on the issue of filler in Reunion and Turnabout, and especially Turnabout Big Top. The filler in those cases adds to the character interactions, but that's not always a special thing. But in the end, I found out that Ace Attorney fans and subscribers of this channel are showing that they cared about what I had to say, and that makes me feel so happy. I cried. Which I won't do in this video, I promise, after the JFA review, that won't happen. About 1 week after the Justice for All review was uploaded, I found myself overjoyed to the point of crying for your support of 3A. Once again, I find myself in a place where times have changed, and I find myself returning to the Ace Attorney series. I've never made this public, but besides talking about the series, I do not ever touch any of the Ace Attorney games between analyses, unless it's a game I haven't played yet. I try to stay out of the realm so that I can come back fresh with the new knowledge I have in life. It's what I did between 3A number 1 and 3A number 2, what I did between 3A number 2 and this video, so I think I'm going to continue this. Now, why does this matter? Well, it's because I care greatly about this review series. This series is the one shot I have at making my thoughts heard. Once I go beyond a game, I can only connect back so much at once to what I already said in previous 3As. In other words, I can't go back to fix mistakes or clarify my points. The purpose of going back to previously reviewed games is to expand on what I already said, not correct what I said. At least, that's the goal. So with all that said, I previewed my underlying focus with this review in my JFA analysis. Let's take a brief look at what I said back in December. When it comes to the characters, my eventual analysis of Trials and Tribulations will heavily focus on them, as that'll be the last time a lot of these characters have a major appearance. So once again, I'm pushing them off a bit. Although I think for the 2 analyses we have under our belt, I'm pretty sure so far, I covered everything that needed to be said on Edgeworth and Francisca. So far. The others will have to wait, and I did spend a good bit on Phoenix growing as a lawyer. I'm really glad I could focus on the atmosphere in this analysis, definitely less for that in Trials and Tribulations. Yes, less about atmosphere and more about the characters. Of course, I will be focusing on everything in varying degrees of detail, but I will definitely talk about the main characters more, with the exception of Phoenix, Miles, and Francisca beyond their appearance in this game. One more worthwhile note, I added tens and tens of opinions and analytical thought everywhere in between in the previous reviews, but I think I started to sound like a walkthrough, so you might see this review isn't quite as long as you might have expected. I have to thank Jay's Reviews for this call of action, because as he said in his review of Metal Gear Solid 3, well, he said the following.
I'll be honest and tell you guys that I believe analyzing this game's story is an incredibly daunting challenge. However, it's also worth mentioning that after the Sly 3 review, I've started to try and make steps towards making a more focused story analysis. By that I mean trimming the fat. Many of the details that happen in a story are important when it comes to reviewing it, however, not every last detail. Needless to say, I want every sentence to lead to some kind of a point.
Thanks to Jay's aspirations, I will be attempting to do the same from now on. Trials and Tribulations. I shortened the first game's title to PW, and then JFA for the second game, so I'm going to refer to Trials and Tribulations as TNT.
Kaboom!
Because this game is dynamite. Believe it or not, this was actually the first Ace Attorney game I played. I know, right? Well, at the time, I knew less about the series than you might think. As in, I knew the objection meme. And that's it. I went to my local GameStop in January of 2013 to use some gift cards I got for Christmas. I went over to the used DS games section and found this game. I didn't know you had to play these games in order. I played the first case and a little bit of the second case before learning from the good old internet that I should have been playing other games first. I put TNT down, played the first and second game, and eventually I finished the rest of TNT. Now you know why I insist you play these games in order. It's because I understand how confusing it can be when being so careless. Plus, the later cases in the trilogy, I'm sure, would not have held as much weight if I didn't go back and correct my mistakes. Anyways, that's just a little tidbit about my experience that I've been holding off for sharing a while now. The development of Trials and Tribulations went much more smoothly than Justice for All's, but even then, that's not saying much. Shu Takumi was very satisfied with how Justice for All turned out and aimed to focus more on the story than ever before in the final entry for what was at the time the Ace Attorney series. This meant that there would be no new gameplay features added. They simply believed the Magatama returning from JFA was fine enough. As I explained in the JFA analysis, Shinji Mikami requested that after the release of PW, Shu Takumi would create a trilogy of games with a climactic final case in the third game. Even though expanding gameplay was completely out of the question, Takumi focused on the story and still wasn't sure what to write. Well, that's exaggerating a little. As you'll see throughout this video, TNT focuses on a lot of flashing back to the past. And what's most interesting to me is that Takumi wrote the entire plot around the tutorial. The first Turnabout and the Lost Turnabout are perfect examples of integrating tutorials in games. No denying that. So, Takumi wanted to live up to his past successes with TNT, even though if you ask me, we don't need tutorials for a series that you should already be playing in order. Still, I respect Takumi's decision. He struggled to find a good excuse for a tutorial at first, but thought about Mia Fey, an important but underdeveloped character at the time. What if Case 1 was one of Mia's first cases? Well, we got that. Takumi knew that TNT's story would have to tie up all loose ends from the previous two games, and he decided to use JFA's cut case, being Recipe for Turnabout. This means that TNT is the only Ace Attorney game to have 5 cases on an original GBA cartridge. As you can imagine, problems occurred. The game was far larger than the maximum capacity of the GBA cartridge, so workarounds had to be made. Takumi and his team channeled their inner Satoru Iwata and found ways to compress data and store it more efficiently. I could go into specifics of what was needed to be done and what was cut, but you can look that stuff up on your own time. It's quite fascinating though. At the end of the day, a whopping 5 cases fit into 1 cartridge, but not without compromise, and we'll get to that later. Despite this harsh challenge, the developers were actually thrilled to find such workarounds. Takumi openly said that it was fun to do. Wow, that's awesome to hear. Phoenix Wright has grown so much over the previous 2 games, so I'm really excited to see how he tackles the first case of this game. It's gonna be so exciting to see how this finale of the trilogy starts off. Will TNT start like a bang with how my abbreviation of the game suggests? Let's analyze it. Case 1 of Trials and Tribulations, Turnabout Memories. That was not what I was expecting. Oh, yep! TNT is starting out with Mia's case as Takumi promised, taking place 5 years before the events of TNT. And it heavily involves a younger Phoenix Wright. See, this is how you start an intro to a game. You exceed all expectations and give people something they didn't know they wanted. This is how TNT behaves in a lot of ways, I find. Trials and Tribulations, clear as day, has something interesting up its sleeve from the very start. And it's important to realize that we get not just Case 1 as a flashback case where we play as Mia, but also Case 4, which fulfills the same situation. The fact that these cases take place in the past automatically makes these cases interesting. There's a reason films and games love using flashbacks. No, it's not just to flesh out backstories. The past is always naturally the most interesting point in time, not the present or the future. There's a mystery to the past, and I'm overjoyed to say that TNT completely capitalizes on that with the whole premise of Turnabout Memories. Shu Takumi must have seen just how successful the reminiscence tragedies from the previous 2 Ace Attorney games were, and must have understood why. Again, the past will make this case intriguing, as long as Turnabout Memories doesn't screw up too badly. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. The case begins with some deja vu as we see our defense attorney really nervous, though you're about to get schooled if you don't pay attention. Something Ace Attorney fans are guilty of all the time.
Alrighty then!
Turnabout Memories does not house Mia's first case, but her second. So with this, we get to see Mia back when she was a lot younger. You can see how scared she feels, but if we analyze Mia, we can see how she takes the pressure of the situation a bit differently than how Phoenix does years later. Let me elaborate. Here we can clearly see Mia being so anxious she's shouting at her mentor, Marvin Grossberg. Mia takes her anxiousness and throws it on her mentor. But Phoenix did no such thing when he started his first case. You see, there is a difference between them, and there are more traits of Mia to be discussed soon. Also, how about Marvin Grossberg? It's great to see him again. Grossberg was very disinterested in Phoenix's investigation during Turnabout Sisters, but it's good to see that he was at least more on the ball during Mia's time. Mia is so confused, and to the point where I feel the bleak outlook that she does. Marvin introduces the client. Oh my god. Where do I begin? This is college Phoenix! He looks like a complete loser, but thankfully he's pretty calm rather than obnoxious. Phoenix explains that he's wearing the mask because he has a cold, which leads into some comic relief with him sneezing during important revelations. Now, into the trial. As expected, Mr. Payne is the prosecutor, but 5 years ago, he certainly had a style to him. I mean, what can I say? He's a fabulous man with a green blazer. I'll just leave him at that. He honestly hasn't changed from his previous appearances, but Mr. Payne seems to be more confident now than he will be later in the timeline. So, what's the case? Well, I have to compliment TNT for being so daring to have one of the most beloved characters in the series, Phoenix Wright, be held for the act of murder. The victim is a man named Doug Swallow, a college student who was killed by electrocution. Dead body seen next to the destroyed power line. Now, Phoenix Wright has a girlfriend named Dahlia Hawthorne, and Mr. Payne proclaims that Phoenix's motive for killing Swallow was because behind his back, Dahlia and Swallow were seeing each other long before the case. Man, Phoenix does not get a break here. But that's not all. Turnabout Memories features Phoenix being completely torn. It's not as bad as it sounds, mind you, but Mr. Wright is hesitant to talk about Dahlia in order to protect her. Now, I have to pause the plot to focus on our character, Mia Fey. Mia may be unstable at her most nervous moments, but can we please appreciate and notice how she snaps at Phoenix, demanding answers? She's not rude about it, occasionally so, but she is not letting this trial slip away from her, and it feels like Mia puts in as much effort into this trial as Phoenix did back in Turnabout Goodbyes. That's a bit of a stretch, I know, but still. This younger Mia is someone I relate to more than Phoenix, actually. She's just that much more understandable. Mia is such a multi-layered character. She's fast, analytical, easily disappointed, pushy when needed, The list goes on. Back to the plot, the court hears a strange revelation. Mr. Wright's medicine, the Cold Killer X, was found in Doug's hand. Mr. Payne brings up a good point afterwards, saying that because Swallow had Phoenix's handprint on his chest, suggests that Swallow was pushed into the cable. Now, that's actually reasonable, so I like how Mia will have to rethink the case now. Phoenix goes on about his love and trust in Dahlia, even showing the court this necklace and bottle she gave him. According to Phoenix, Dahlia asked him to return it to her next time they meet, and that's simply foreshadowing what's to come. As soon as court reconvenes, the previously mentioned Dahlia Hawthorne takes the stand and the entire courtroom comes into complete silence. The judge then breaks the ice, saying, "In my long career as a judge, I have been deceived by many witnesses. It's my job to doubt, take no one at their word. But in your case, I must admit that you radiate a glow of complete sincerity." Oh no, I agree, Mia, this girl is pure evil. Turnabout Memories has been so effective at taking risks, and having the villain be an innocent-looking girl adds to the fire. Think about what a first-time player would be thinking meeting Dahlia, and what would that player be thinking when they hear her theme? It sounds so warm, it sounds so innocent, but there's an element of something being off. I'm appalled that the writers were so eager to give it all away. So let's see how it pays off. Dahlia testifies, saying that she saw Phoenix and Doug behind the school building, with Doug simply collapsing. This is an example of the writers trying to throw a slight curveball. We clearly see Phoenix pushing Doug in the intro. The judge is surprised and the whole court goes into an uproar, despite the fact that Dahlia is covering up what truly happened, therefore potentially helping Mia. Mia swipes that out of the way and demands the truth. God, I love you, Mia. She calls out Dahlia for lying, and Mia has to uncomfortably tell the confused Mr. Payne that they had met before. If you were paying close attention during your first playthrough, you'd assume they met in Mia's first case. TNT has the whole you play it again and see things coming kind of shtick. Mia shows Dahlia she's the boss by reminding the court that Wright had to have pushed Doug because Wright's palm print is on Doug's jacket. Doesn't that devastate your case? Again, no one talks about this for some reason, but Mia Fey will do whatever she wants. Sometimes she's defending Wright, other times she's criticizing him. Sometimes she's keeping hush, and other times she strikes. Miss Hawthorne proceeds to change her testimony, but the judge and Mr. Payne are so seduced they don't even care. Ugh. I bet Mia wants to perform a meteor smash on them right now. The apparently nervous Mia is on fire once again. Swallow's watch indicates a gap in time for Phoenix to have killed him. And because Dahlia was there to notice the two, or at least Swallow, she must be the killer. Jumping ahead a bit, Marvin Grossberg re-enters the courtroom. I glossed over this before, but he left earlier in the trial to go get more evidence from Mia. Something I also say for now is the fact that Mia presented a newspaper clipping of a murder with similar circumstances to Swallow's. Well, Marvin shows up with the exact police report on that murder. I'm gonna call that a little BS, considering the coincidence was in the control of a character, making it feel a little unbelievable. Minor complaint, but it's worth mentioning. The exact facts on the murder being discussed shows Dahlia as a suspect of poisoning a defense attorney named Diego Armando, who is Mia Fey's boyfriend. Despite this, Dahlia escaped conviction, and it's my personal assumption that she escaped because of her seductive behavior and look of innocence. Mia keeps supplying the court with solid reasons, pointing towards the guilt of Miss Hawthorne until Phoenix states that Doug Swallow met with him to warn him about the theft of chemicals. This would make sense, considering Doug is actually studying as a pharmacist. He suspects Dahlia took them, and because she was seeing Phoenix, he gave some careful advice. Wow, victim characters almost never get this much character or backstory. It's a shame because remember what I said about the past always being interesting. But hey, I'm glad to put Doug Swallow up there with the likes of Robert Hammond, Bruce Goodman, Dustin Prince, and Turner Gray. Back to my point, Wright was in disbelief, so he pushed Doug out of anger. Okay, so now that's explained. Mia felt confident, so she traced it all back to the bottle. If Dahlia wanted the bottle necklace back, it must have been to kill someone else. Similarly to Diego Armando, Mia claims it was to kill Phoenix Wright. Holy crap! And as the player, just think about what made her decide to poison Swallow instead. It has to be the conversation where he warned Phoenix. Makes too much sense. She was there listening in. Dahlia becomes very pushy and denies this. Mia then challenges Dahlia to drink the cold medicine to prove it was safe. What am I even playing anymore? It was established with a conversation between Mia and Grossberg that the poison must have been hidden in the Cold Killer X bottle, so that Phoenix would be likely to take it. Well, thank God, because we all know he only survived due to sheer luck, not taking the medicine. So again, Dahlia plans to kill Phoenix, but here's his conversation with Swallow and decides to change her plan. So with Mia challenging Miss Bitch Hawthorne, Hawthorne breaks and with cold eyes tells Mia that they would meet again. And it's still not over, because Mia challenges Mr. Payne to drink from the bottle as well, but in a comedic way, Payne loses his hair in a breakdown. And after that, she challenges Phoenix to drink the bottle as well, and he declines. In the aftermath, Phoenix still doesn't believe Dahlia would try to kill him. Remember how I established that despite his quirks, College Phoenix is no dummy? This means that, yes, considering there was no established motive to murder Phoenix before the change to Swallow, this case does end with loose ends. But I won't take off a single point, because those loose ends will be concluded in the surprisingly intertwined Ace Attorney game, just later on. Phoenix thanked Mia, and because of this trial, he said he was going to switch his career path towards becoming a lawyer. Now, how sweet of a setup is that? Turnabout Memories is easily the best first case thus far. As unpopular as it was for me to say in my JFA review, I was, and I still am, a fan of The Lost Turnabout. I gave well-explained reasons as to why. But with the pure interest of going back a couple years before the events of PW, and seeing Mia Fey at her second trial, it's hard not to get invested. The plot is interesting as well, and is more complicated than the first Turnabout and The Lost Turnabout, though not by much. The crime itself was a huge focus in this first case, and with not a lot of time directed to lore, which is totally fine, but was needed considering the time in Ace Attorney history. The only lore was the newspaper clipping that detailed the poisoning of Mia's boyfriend, which to no one's surprise will be relevant later in the game. The atmosphere and feel of this all taking place in the past gives this case that vintage kind of feel, and the images with the area behind the building helps me envision everything that went on. I promised in 3A number 3, I'd focus a lot on characters, since a lot of these guys and girls won't be returning ever again, and I think you've seen me do a lot of that already. I think Mia is well explained, so I won't recap her character, and the same goes for how College Phoenix behaves. It's Dahlia's turn! Most of the screen time with Hawthorne is an illusion, so let's analyze her fake personality first. Dahlia pretends to be an innocent girl, of course, but she also tries to use puppy eyes as well. Dahlia, for a first case villain, is quite fleshed out and reminds me a lot of Matt and Guard for how they are both good at deceiving. In reality, Dahlia's a bitch. She is absolutely intolerable. Now, Turnabout Memory suffers from 2 issues. For one, Marvin Grossberg needed a lot more development. Do not tell me that it's okay to not develop these characters because it's a first case. Look no further than Maggie Bird from The Lost Turnabout. It genuinely saddens me to see Grossberg get the same amount of time to shine as Mia did in the frickin' first Turnabout. The other problem I have with Turnabout Memories is College Phoenix, or specifically his lack of direction. I praise how because he was so protective of Dahlia, he was really hard to defend. But at times, I feel like the writers took too many liberties and made it a little unfair. To explain what I mean, I think dealing with Phoenix was a bit harder than it should have been. It's certainly interesting to see Phoenix talk like he's in love, and it was definitely a big risk for Takumi and his team to choose something like this. But I think College Phoenix can be genuinely annoying. I'll take a couple of points off for that. Overall, I really enjoy Turnabout Memories, and I feel like this case is extremely strong quality-wise. So far, TNT is going very well, and I see no reason to stall before going into Case 2. So here we go. Case 2, The Stolen Turnabout. Well, Gumshoe is in some place, and it looks like we have a villain in disguise running around pulling heists Sly Cooper style. Maya and Pearl are excited to tell Mr. Nick that one of Karain Village's sacred urns is on display at the city's most expensive department store, Lordly Taylor. Phoenix comes along and, wow, this place is so fancy. I'm sure the developers chose the department store type as a sort of ironic joke. Something worth analyzing is the atmosphere of the case. Yeah, I know what I promised, okay? But I'm still going to talk about it here and there. Anyways, this case is pretty down to earth at the start, a nice contrast from the climactic and uber-engaging premise in Case 1. To continue on, the gang heads down to the storage basement, and they run into a familiar face. The Stolen Turnabout gets a ton of points for this shock alone. Adrian Andrews. Yes, not a lot of heart or someone who is just going to say a couple one-liners and leave. Adrian does actually play a fairly important role to this case, which is not often seen with returning minor characters. Also, choosing a character such as Adrian, who is tied to a lot of tough emotions, to come back in what seems to be a relaxed case is nothing short of genius. As Matthew Matosis might put it, this completely counters expectations, and the Stolen Turnabout is better for it. Let's see what Adrian has to say to Mr. Wright about the traumatic experiences related to Farewell My Turnabout. Mr. Wright was there for me when I really needed help. Phoenix, Maya, Pearl, and Adrian reflect on the case. It should be appreciated that the characters reminisce the events of the case while not going into full retell mode. It gives the player great pleasure to see Adrian say that the help she received from Mr. Wright changed her life. Amy Faye, creator of the Karain channeling technique, is seen in a statue form by the basement door, and it's best we come back to this much later. After a nice dinner with Adrian that unfortunately we only get to hear about, the next day begins, and the thief from the intro is seen on Nick's television. The thief goes by the name Mask Demask, and he stole the Fae's sacred urn from Lordly Taylor. Yikes. Dick Gumshoe fills Mr. Wright in on the circumstances before they head to Lordly Taylor's basement and meet the ace detective named Luke Atney. This man, he is something special, I'll tell ya. Atney is very eccentric, but in ways not seen in the case of Turnabout Big Top, for example. He's very egotistical, claiming to be a famous detective, and scolds Phoenix for not knowing of him. Now, you would believe this man to be unlikable, but his charm and design make it so that you can find him likable. The tuxedo combined with the hair, and my favorite piece of eye candy being the magnifying glass, all led to what Jay's Reviews considers to be one of the most striking designs in the series. The reason Atme is doing a private investigation, even though the police is already doing one, is because Mask to Mask is his nemesis. At this scene, Nick and the girls find an inconsistency with how the basement was yesterday, and find paint. Someone was playing Splatoon. Now, we just started the first investigation, and before I jump ahead, let's add on to the analyzing I've already done. Notice the Stolen Turnabout starts out with no sign of a murder whatsoever. This is downright revolutionary for the series at this point. The advantage of writing in an event of theft before a murder occurs goes beyond a surprise with the unconventional behavior of that decision. But rather, this choice offers a surprise for when the actual murder is revealed. 2 surprises, 1 writing technique. That is extremely efficient for the writers. It's not exactly deserving of praise, but of appreciation. Gumshoe calls Wright and tells him that Mask to Mask turned himself in. The gang meets with the thief and he is obnoxious. He's downright terrified. This is Ron Delight, a man who is shouting at the top of his lungs out of what seems to be fear. He seems so innocent, but still claims to be the Mask to Mask. Despite this, they ask about the urn, and Ron says he lost it. And this sets Maya off. I mean, really, dude? He cries for forgiveness, saying he's sorry constantly, and you can't help but feel bad for him. And having Mr. Wright be calm about it is the only saving grace here. Ron's wife, Desiree, is excited to see that Mr. Wright wants to help out, but as the player, we know they're in for the urn. Phoenix decides to defend Ron in court, which would be ridiculous, but it makes sense too if he has doubts about him being the real thief. Pearl went missing, but was found back at the law office. And I'd like to stop and highlight Phoenix and Maya's conversation about their relationship and the Korean culture. So this was some unnecessary but enjoyable information to learn about. Men and women have an uneven divide due to the fact that only women can inherit the spirit channeling power, causing lots of marriages to end in unfinished divorces. Pearls is unfortunately victim to this, with her father leaving her a long time ago. Without her here, the writers continue to find ways to develop her character further. Phoenix asks Maya about why Pearls is so attached to her, with the answer being that Maya is the only family she has left. I'm quite impressed that what started off to seem like unnecessary information led to an expansion of Pearl's character. Miss Andrews unfortunately goes back to a bit of her old self, with her looking scared and upset when she apologizes for letting the sacred urn of Amy get stolen. After the encounter, Phoenix heads to Atme's agency, where Atme reveals that he was guarding the basement, yet didn't see anyone walk into the basement and take the urn. Well, we have a psych lock, so if you ask me, or the player at this point, Atme's our criminal. With the successful break, Atme reveals that Mask to Mask must have entered the basement another way than the door. Atme presents a picture of Mask to Mask that very night, holding the box the urn was kept in. Then, Wright finds a green envelope in Ron's hideout with a blackmail letter inside that mentions a place named KB Security. Shocking reveal, but all is thrown off the rails with the return of... Larry Butts. The last time we saw this childhood friend of Nick was in Turnabout Goodbyes. Larry somehow got hired as a security guard at KB Security. Let's cover Larry's character here. First off, he's just as loud and won over by attractive women as before, but now he's changing girlfriends faster than in PW. Jeez Louise! Larry does reveal a helpful notion that due to KB's security's location, Ron couldn't have gotten there in time with the requested money if he stole the urn at Lordly Taylor. Larry, that was useful information. Poor Pearls got lost but ended up at Atmy's detective agency. This genuinely had me scared my first playthrough, but all is well and good as she is completely safe. With that said, a suspicious bag is on Atmy's table, but Wright fails to see what's inside before Luke appears. He informs Wright that tomorrow's trial will see the debut of Prosecutor Godo, in the same way it was revealed in Turnabout Sisters and Reunion in Turnabout, where Miles and Francisca were introduced respectively. According to Atmy, Miles Edgeworth said that Godo is the best prosecutor in the country. Holy smokes. Now, to the trial. Ron is still trying to make us believe that he's the masked mask, probably due to how hopeless he feels. I should probably clarify before we go any further that I do enjoy Ron's character, but I don't find him outstandingly interesting. In fact, he's on the weaker side for defendants so far. I find his wife more interesting for her cooperation in the first investigation and how she flat out doesn't believe Ron is the thief. Phoenix then internally doubts himself, but hopes that Desiree is truly right that Ron is innocent. And now that court is in session, Godo introduces himself as a legendary prosecutor after annihilating the judge with rude behavior. What the hell is with this guy's mask? Well, who knows? What a design. I must say, the white hair, laser-looking mask, it's pretty insane. My first impression of our main prosecutor for TNT is legendarily, to say in Godo's terms. You see, there's always been a memorable factor when meeting Francisca or meeting Miles, but I suppose Godo takes the cake for the sheer bluntness in his voice. He also combines his bluntness with philosophical inquiry. I've returned from the depths of hell to battle with you. Credit to Phoenix for taking the situation well. It's not often we see Phoenix break away from the player's mindset, but you know, when he does, it really stands out. What I mean by this is how the player is feeling interested in this new character, but also very uncomfortable with how threatening and philosophical he is. While Phoenix, on the other hand, stutters slightly, but he remains in his default pose. Phoenix is ahead of the player emotionally, a sharp contrast to his early days as a lawyer. Aha. Now, is there any particular reason as to why Godo is acting like a jerk? Yes, there is. Not yet relevant, though. Despite how Godo's introduction and behavior at the start of the trial is attention-grabbing, I'm not a fan at all. Besides Phoenix's response to his behavior, there's nothing here that I like. The reason is because this feels all too similar to Francisca's introduction, and I felt like hers was way better. Francisca had a father's legacy on her shoulders, and her claims about her father immediately reminded Phoenix of how he put Manfred into rest. Wow, the tensions were through the roof, and to pull off a similar thing but weaker is unacceptable. Where it is admittedly unknown as to why, Godo has some issues with Wright, and is acting like a jerk to everyone in the court because of it. But there's nothing new here whatsoever. Of course I expect Godo to be threatening, but to have his introduction play out so similar to Francisca's is just plain lazy. Anyways, Godo snaps at Gumshoe to cut straight to the testimony. Now there's a complication with Masky Mask in the photo, which leads to a miniature argument between Mr. Wright and Godo. This leads Godo to bring up his next witness being Luke Atmy, of course. Atmy claimed to have been struck by the thief before he could land a blow on them, and then he changes his testimony, stating that he was struck with a different object, the sword that the Amy statue held. Mr. Wright is on top of his game here. I mean, you cannot deny he's grown a lot from Justice for All's harsh and challenging cases. Why do I bring this up? Because this is the first time we can access Phoenix's skills after JFA. So, now with all that said, Phoenix doesn't buy Atmy's crap and accuses him of being Masky Mask. There you go, Phoenix. And then Atmy cracks.
Intermission!
That's hilarious, but so mean. Now, I'm interested in this guy. This is where Godo starts to shine. We'll get back to Atmi in just a moment, but let's look at this scene. Phoenix makes a big claim about Atmi and pulls it off with Atmi admitting to this with great laughter. Godo then proceeds to take on his cups of coffee and throws one directly onto Phoenix's head. Not only is that painful for Phoenix, but absolutely, without a doubt, an embarrassment. Reason is, not only does Godo find this claim ridiculous, but he even goes as far to make fun of Phoenix's cheesy line. The ace detective is actually an ace thief. I smell a best-selling novel. I'm dying of laughter every time I see that. Godo has a gimmick in the same vein as Francisca in addition to coffee. It's a good gimmick because it adds to his cool personality. Seeing him gulp down exactly 17 cups of coffee for every trial, it's just awesome. It's cool, and it's simple black coffee. I'll talk more about Godo later, but that's a nice start. Atmi's reply to Phoenix is a maniacal laugh, with his neck moving in circles. This adds to his likability, I'd argue, but it will also push the player away from him because you'll be saying, yeah, this guy's pretty insane. Remember how I said the Stolen Turnabout was full of surprises? Well, get a load of this, as Dr. Eggman once said. Desiree bursts into the courtroom with the sacred urn that had been stolen. She claims it was in Atmi's office. It's hard to tell how to feel with what comes next in this trial. Godo claims this should be untrusted information because Desiree is the wife of the defendant. She's horrified at this reply, but what does Phoenix think about all of this? Well, he remembers feeling a round and hard object in Atmi's bag before he barged into the agency, as this clearly validates Desiree's claim. However, he himself can't prove that, and I like that, so instead Phoenix asks the judge for a fingerprint test, but then that fails because Atmi admits to being the Maskedy Mask again, and then the judge agrees that Atmi stole the urn and not wrong, so he gives him a not guilty verdict, but then Ron storms in and claims to be the Maskedy Mask. Oh my god, stop, slow down. There are so many reveals here, it's absolutely insane. If I haven't been clear enough, the Stolen Turnabout never stops pulling punches, and the case gets better every single time it happens. But we aren't done. Godo calms everyone down with his reserved demeanor and asks Ron to prove that he is indeed the real thief. A very smart move that leads to a revealing truth. Ron testifies about having no alibi, but Mr. Wright and the player easily shoot that down with the wallet Larry Butts gave us earlier, including adding on to the evidence by explaining the one useful notion Larry gave us. Ron suggests that he could have been set up, but Godo questions the validity of that and demands proof that Ron did go to KB security. Mr. Wright uses Larry as a means of explaining how we know Ron was there, prompting the judge to give Ron Delight a non-guilty verdict, but also delaying the case for more investigation. Once again, destroying expectations. The case continues even though the defendant is now free of charge. Until Godo breaks the news that Ron is being charged for murder. Mr. Wright blames himself, considering he proved that Ron was at KB security around 1 a.m., the same time of the murder. The murder was of the CEO of KB security named Kane Ballard. All of this information is supplied by Godo, whose mysterious aura has definitely carried with him beyond the courtroom. Well, Phoenix, you've got a lot of work to do. The authenticity of the new urn is being validated by Pearl back in Kurain Village. Yes, she just wanders there by herself. Meanwhile, thanks to the help of the wife of Ron, Mr. Wright and Maya get to the address of KB security where they meet up with Dick Gumshoe. After that, Wright goes to see Larry. After that, Wright meets with Adrian and asks if she noticed the founded urn looked different from the original. You guessed it. A shocking revelation, but Adrian is hiding a secret, as we can tell through the Cyclops. Up until the encounter with Adrian, there wasn't much learned, but let's cover the important details. For one, Larry Butts might have missed the murder of Cain Ballard, but the emergency buzzer at the scene of the crime was never pressed at all. However, Larry is completely wrong because the buzzer did go off at 1 a.m., aka the time of the murder. Ron DeLite is paid a visit and upon questioning revealed that when he entered Ballard's room, he was attacked and knocked out cold. When he woke up, he saw Ballard's body unconscious and decided to hide the body in the room's safe to avoid suspicion. This safe was mentioned in the conversation with Gumshoe. And now, we finally get to know why Ron pretends that he is the Masked Mask. Yes, pretends. Ron is not the actual Masked Mask, but we don't have concrete information on who is just yet. The reason Ron pretends to be the Masked Mask is so that he can have an alibi for the murder. This I really like. I have to give credit to Ron here. It's been well established that whoever stole the urn and whoever murdered Cain Ballard, they have to have been different people. It's simply not possible to get from one location to the other in the span of the times of the crimes provided. So, Ron pretending to have stolen the urn wasn't a terrible way to remove suspicion. However, this isn't to say that Ron has never stolen as the Masked Mask before. Phoenix presents an article related to the thief's first theft. With more evidence and knowledge in hand, Mr. Wright meets up with Pearl and breaks Adrian's psych locks. The truth of the matter is that Adrian broke the original urn. Yeah, I saw that one coming too, but it's still ultimately unfortunate for two reasons. One, this valuable and sacred piece of Fae history is ruined, and second, the truth of Adrian's mistake coming to life sends her in a depressed mood all over it. They even go as far to play the Steel Samurai's ballad here. Everything seems resolved, but I like how there are still a couple things unanswered before heading to the final trial. The first is that we don't know who moved the Amy statue back to its original spot after Adrian tried to hide in the paint. But the second is that, we still don't know who murdered Cain Ballard. Well, you can make a good guess though. It's not exactly impossible to guess on your first playthrough. Godo calls out Ron, and when asked to present his first witness, we learn an interesting factoid about our laserhead prosecutor. Godo drinks exactly 17 cups of coffee per trial. Remember how I was so impressed with his philosophical and sometimes nonsensical phrases? This has to be my favorite. It's such a small detail, yet I'll remember the number of cups of coffee he has every trial more than the plot of the Stolen Turnabout. These are the types of details that deserve praise for simply existing. Godo, you're so cool. I almost don't mind how condescending you are to Mr. Wright. Godo has Ron testify, actually. He explains his experience at KB Security. Mr. Wright points out a giant flaw in the testimony, being that the buzzer was pressed at the scene of the crime. Now, that's smart, because there is no reason for Ron to press the buzzer if he didn't do anything wrong. The developers decided that it would be an appropriate time to deliver another surprising revelation. One last exciting event to end a case full of such, double jeopardy. Phoenix suggests that a third person was at the scene of the crime, one person being Ballard, another being the killer, and then the third being the witness who pressed the buzzer. Now, by the second case of TNT, you should expect Phoenix to have become a better lawyer, so without question, he claims that Luke Atmey was at the scene of the crime. Yes! Excellent, Phoenix! Now for the actual revelation. Godo exclaims that Atmey is in another courtroom on trial at this very moment, for he is to be charged for the Masked Mask! What the hell? Due to the rules of double jeopardy, Mr. Wright can't let Atmey gain a free alibi card. We see Godo go through some development at this point. He's mostly accepting of Wright to stall the other trial and bring Atmey here, but only if he can, without a doubt, irrefutably, no questions asked, prove Atmey was there. On my first playthrough, I sweated. Yes, I physically sweated at this question. This is Phoenix's opportunity to change the course of the case. Then, Mia's voice plays in Mr. Wright's mind. Phoenix demands a recess, and then, the moment you've been waiting for. It's almost unbelievable that Atme can pretend to be the Masty Mask, and so convincingly. He deserves serious credit for that. Now back to the proper courtroom, Atme testifies but constantly trips under his own righteous persona. First of all, Phoenix demolishes his photo he presents as it's clearly not consistent with what the player knows about Lord Lee Taylor's basement. On top of that, Atme gave away his knowledge of the paint Adrian spilled through his calling card. With almost nothing left to defend himself, Atme nervously asks what his motive would be. Mr. Wright, showing his true power once again, annihilates Atme with the blackmail letter. Sure, some players could say this is too easy gameplay-wise, but who cares? These games can be challenging at times, so it's nice to have moments where you can feel the satisfaction of nailing the killer. That's the entire point of the Ace Attorney series, after all. Notice how Godo doesn't really do much here. Unlike Francisca and Edgeworth, he seems to just admit that he's lost and he'll just relax from that point on. That's interpretational, but I think there's an argument for that trait about him. And now, take a look as the gallery slams at me before I analyze this scene. Madness. Just pure madness. Let's take a closer look. I think this scene is actually the climax of the Stolen Turnabout. I don't usually try to pinpoint the climax of an Ace Attorney case, but it seems rather early this time around, wouldn't you say? Seeing Atme get slammed by the gallery is something I wish we saw more often in other cases, but we'll have to wait for more of that in the crossover with Professor Layton, and most likely DGS. Not too sure about that one, though. All hope was lost for the defense, sadly. Godo finally spoke up again, and he killed the atmosphere immediately by asking Phoenix to prove that Atme was there at the exact time of the murder. Thankfully, Mia appeared to give Phoenix the push he always really needs, just like the many times in PW and JFA. These moments I have saved for now in this review series, that is Ace Attorney, Analyzation. So I apologize if this tangent feels out of left field, but this is a cumulative review series. It's practically a common joke in the fan base that Mia always comes in to save the day for Phoenix, and it's truly funny. It is. However, on a critical basis, I'm pretty mixed on the subject. I like how Mia's channeled appearances bring back the themes of hope and perseverance the series has always been good at displaying, and I like how appreciated Phoenix is for her help. Also, on the positive side, the man we love has grown in terms of experience and maturity throughout the game, so I feel he almost deserves a little push near the end. On a more negative note, Mia can feel like an intrusion and a contrivance when looked at as a piece of writing. In PW, Mia was almost completely taken away near the end, and she was used in JFA to show how tough the cases are. But at the end of the day, the transition into these moments is never very smooth. Overall, I'm mixed on this recurring idea, but I think the Stolen Turnabout uses Mia well. Back to the case. Mia asks Phoenix to cross-examine Luke one more time. A minor contrivance occurs this way as Luke Atmey happens to slip up in his new testimony about Ron wearing the mask-to-mask costume at the murder scene. The clever twist about the crossing courtrooms not only led to an interesting moment, but also means that Atmey never heard Ron's testimony. In other words, Atmey could only have known this if he was at the murder scene as well. Through some help with Mia, Goto finally got his question answered on how Mr. Wright could prove Atmey was there. Atmey breaks down, and Ron is free of all charges. Desiree has a new appreciation for Ron, but for some reason he's still upset. You be you. In addition, Mia is in a lighthearted mood, which is a nice contrast from the last time we saw her in Trials and Tribulations. Granted, it was during a much different time and situation, but Turnabout Memories was the last time we saw her in the playthrough. With that, we get this hilarious scene with Pearl being protective of Phoenix and Maya's relationship that she's always made up in her head. And look, the urn was put back together. I'm sure Amy's spirit is happy to see that. And with that, we summarized and analyzed the Stolen Turnabout, so let's conclude the case. This case has a strongly positive reputation in the Ace Attorney community, and while I might have built up a reputation for being a contrarian on a lot of things, I promise it's never intentional. It's not too common that I agree with the majority, but I hold the Stolen Turnabout in high regards as well. It's a fantastic case. The atmosphere from Justice for All is carried over in a couple instances, Lordly Taylor being a key area of memorability for me. But unlike Justice for All at times, keywords being at times, the Stolen Turnabout makes the characters one of the highlights. Ron Delight's behavior is odd, but he has a kind heart which keeps him balanced. But I do find him still just a little unremarkable. I can't quite put my finger on why he's unremarkable, but nonetheless, he's well executed, I think. Desiree leaves very little impact, but she was enjoyable to have around. Okay, so maybe the Stolen Turnabout's characters were not a highlight of the case at all? Except for one. The Ace Detective. Luke Atmey is an ambitious villain. He tried to have the world believe that he had an arch nemesis, who is really just made up, until Ron stepped in, of course. And with that, he passed himself off as the Ace Detective, a complete parody of the Ace Attorney series. Luke tried to be so many things secretively, but all failed. Now, why is this character so loved? Is he truly as great as everyone says? Yes, he is. Luke Atmey is a great villain simply for how much he managed to get done in such little time, yet Phoenix demolishes each one in the matter of only an hour in real-world time. It's also worth noting his strong abilities to excite the player through his intricacies. He added a lot to the investigation segments without being so over the top that his defeat felt silly. It didn't feel silly, it felt satisfying as you'd hope. With a memorable design, memorable theme, and memorable scenario surrounding him, Luke Atmey is one of the best villains I've analyzed thus far. Atmey makes up for the lack of other new characters, but don't forget that Larry Butts was pretty important, and while he wasn't vastly different from his appearance in the first Turnabout, or Turnabout Goodbyes, more of the same is appreciated considering he was absent in the previous game. Now, I didn't highlight many things wrong with the case as we went through, but there are two things that bother me, and they bear repeating. For one, Goto's introduction to the case is laughably stale compared to Francisca's, which is only relevant because of how similar they are, as I explained before. Another problem is the lack of a distraction. One more location and one more character would have provided enough freshness to the case to entice the player and distract them from the crime in order to build up suspense. Some would say that the Stolen Turnabout doesn't need any more surprises, as it already has a ton. Which is, I suppose that's true, I think that's a fair argument, but but I feel like Phoenix, Maya, and Pearls are constantly going to the same places. More than usual, I suppose. Regardless of these two gripes of mine, this is a nearly flawless case. The greatest strengths of the Stolen Turnabout are its use of unique and shocking plot revelations, and the writing of character interaction. I've dwelled on the surprises enough, but how about that character interaction? God, I love Justice for All, but did Phoenix, Maya, and Pearls ever discuss this much with each other? The trio's dynamics of wit and seriousness have reached new levels in this case. In addition, Phoenix is once again used to bring out the best in characters, such as Ron and Desiree. Seeing Phoenix's internal reactions to minor characters has been one of the best staples the franchise has, yet I feel that only Turnabout Big Top and maybe Turnabout Samurai have managed to do this as well as the Stolen Turnabout. I could make you sit here all day as we go through with example of example, but I think if you paid attention or looked at the footage, you'll remember from your first playthrough just how great these interactions truly are. And with that, I have reviewed the Stolen Turnabout, an excellent case that gives Reunion and Turnabout a run for its money. Let's take a break from Trials and Tribulations plot to talk about the presentation. I had very good things to say about the soundtracks to the previous two games, but I forgot to mention how they're all tied to a general theme. Let's see, if PW's soundtrack aimed at offering something catchy and easy to listen to while you're following the plot, and if JFA's soundtrack aimed at having dual tones as well as being atmospheric in general, then I think TNT's soundtrack aims at fitting the situation as much as possible. Before I talk about what I like in the soundtrack, let's expand upon something I alluded to earlier. Do you remember when I said that 5 cases managed to make their way onto a tiny GBA cartridge and that compromises had to be made? The instrumentation was compressed like hell. Hey, as great as this game is, no one said it was perfect, right? And they reuse pieces from JFA. A lot. That's not a big deal, but it sure shows the lack of true effort here. I mean, tropes and continuity in design is one of my favorite parts of media in general. I should always be able to expect an objection theme, or a tell the truth theme, or an investigation core theme. You get the point. However, I also expect those tracks to be unique to each Ace Attorney game. We've had 2 games up until this point, so excuse me for having some kind of expectation. I know this will sound harsh to continue to rant about, but it really bothers me. Trials and Tribulations lacks certain staple tracks, such as an investigation core theme. Investigation Core 2004 flat out doesn't exist. Was it really that hard to cram in one more track? Or a few more? Yeah, other tracks are replaced with JFAs, as I previously stated, which is a complete slap in the face to those who really care about their consistency. I am taking a chunk of points off for this, but the real kicker is the compression. Compressed like hell doesn't do this justice, and that's not an Ace Attorney 4 joke. Let me be clear about the composition though. Every new track is bursting with creativity and variety in instrument choices, with the main goal being to fit every situation possible. The composer truly understood composition and did an even better job than the previous 2. Yeah, seriously, from my point of view, TNT soundtrack is the best compositional-wise. The kicker is, say it with me, the compression. You can tell that many of JFA's instrument samples are being used here, but they sound as if they were never finished. The quality itself is disappointing coming off of the most fine-sounding PW and the much-improved sounding JFA, but even the DS standards are bad. The DS versions of the Phoenix Wright trilogy improved the instrumentation and quality of the original tracks, but because TNT started out at a much lower point than the previous 2 on GBA, it's still sadly behind the others. Now that's a real bummer. I won't bash the soundtrack anymore, but I do feel that the instrumentation does take away from my enjoyment of the composition. Here are the highlights. These certainly deserve to be listened to, even if I have to be an annoying nitpicker. There are some more I will highlight as we go. I'll be playing more music simply to try and make up for how I feel people will receive about my complaints on the sound quality. Anyways, the graphics in TNT are mostly identical to the previous two games, sharing the same models for returning characters and the like. However, while the new characters are another slight step up from JFA, which is great by the way, the backgrounds are mostly on the same level of detail. There's also even more animation and cutscenes like there was in JFA's super cool case intros. Let me say that slightly differently again. The animated case intros are even better in TNT than they were in JFA. Can you believe that? Takumi was fascinated with the creativity. The developers used movie effects such as monochrome settings to give TNT's cutscenes a vintage movie feel, to quote Takumi. Just so you know, these presentation differences between the trilogy, they're all small and I barely consider them, but if you look closely you can really appreciate the changes that they brought. Overall, I think the presentation is great in TNT, but the soundtrack's compressed state is a tad disappointing. And I'd say a little jarring too. Phew, okay. We've been rolling for a long time, and there's still a lot to analyze left. I think we can make it past Case 3 without an intermission, so without further ado, Case 3, Recipe for Turnabout. Well, that was quite interesting. Phoenix and Maya enjoy a nice conversation before Dick Gumshoe arrives to ask Mr. Wright about something. Gumshoe is shocked that Mr. Wright would lose a case, and Phoenix has no idea what he's talking about. Gumshoe presents him an article detailing the case. Gumshoe has worked close enough with Phoenix to trust him, and obviously the player trusts him as well, so something weird is going on. Out of nowhere, Gumshoe states that Phoenix must have been impersonated. This inspires Wright to request a retrial. So the case intro was technically an illusion, as some elements were in fact inaccurate, such as the fact that Phoenix Wright is there. Now, we know that someone potentially disguised as him, but they reuse his sprite, which is a problem because we later learn about how the disguiser wasn't very good at his job. This is in stark contrast to the entire point of the case intros throughout the series, and I do take issue with this. The Stolen Turnabout understood how to create interesting situations with surprise that truly heightened the player's experience while solving the case and catching the criminal. A common issue with Recipe for Turnabout is that it tries to achieve the same ambitious strategies as the Stolen Turnabout, but they fail to land for one reason or another. The case intros in all of the previous cases I've analyzed offered the best look we have into what actually took place at the crime. This was helpful for setting an atmosphere and providing context to the situation. Having parts of the intro be false contradicts the point or strength of the previous case intros. But I understand that this is not a huge deal, just worth docking off a couple points. As for the case setup itself, the whole fake Phoenix stuff feels contrived, but it was played for laughs. I am totally fine with these contrived events if it's played for laughs and not overdone. Seriously, I am. Heck, Dual Destinies does this a lot, and 7.41 times out of 10, they made me laugh. If I'm giving Dual Destinies a lot of credit for something, I must be serious, guys. Phoenix and Maya decide to take upon the case in a way, as they decide to go to the detention center. The client is... Maggie Burt? Oh no! Poor Maggie. To recap, Mr. Wright defended Maggie way back in the Lost Turnabout, and we learn that she's lived a life full of unfortunate events. This was sometimes delivered in a comedic light, and if I am to take it as I think I should be, Recipe for Turnabout is trying to make me laugh at the fact that Maggie is unlucky as ever. It's clever, but more important to me is that we can see an already great minor character develop more. Maggie has ended her career in police work for a waitress job at a French restaurant. There, she was waiting a table for 2 men, and apparently one of them was poisoned. However, nobody working there saw the other man. I think it makes sense that Maggie would be charged, considering she was waiting the man's table, but the information Maggie is supplying makes everything seem just a little vague. She passed out of pure shock in seeing the victim dead, and she missed out on the most vulnerable moments of the killer in the process. While that information is vague and rather lame, Phoenix, Maya, and Maggie all agree that the other man at the table is the killer. Next stop is at Tres Bien, I think I'm saying that correctly, a restaurant that literally translates to very good. Maya wonders if anyone's here, so Phoenix decides to yell at the top of his lungs and see if anybody's around. Once again, I'm happy to see that Trials and Tribulations features some of the best Phoenix-Maya encounters ever. After discussing the newspaper with MC Bomber written on it, it sparks Maggie to make a connection. Wright learns why Maggie didn't identify fake Wright as fake, and back to the restaurant. During the scripting process, I sat at my computer in uncertainty every time I realized that I needed to analyze and discuss my opinions on Jean Armstrong. Look, I knew that my vision of what I'd say about him would be inoffensive and tasteful, but I kept feeling that someone was going to get offended anyway and attack me personally. I was skittish when writing about him for weeks, until I realized something very important.
The channel is mine!
Alright, Jean Armstrong. Armstrong's homosexuality could be debated as a part of his character, but I'm not. He seems to embody a romanticized idea of a homosexual man, but that's not relevant to the case at all. He's quite the person, I'll tell you. Armstrong provides comic relief in his beliefs about his restaurant, and he always jumps to conclusions. Armstrong is the owner of Tres Bien and has had quite a hard time running the place. The restaurant is extremely expensive to eat at, and very few people stop by at all. Armstrong doesn't dodge any questions from Phoenix and Maya until 3 Cyclocks appear when a clear motive against Bride is called into question. Unfortunately, Phoenix has lost possession of the Magatama, and this causes some tension. However, he can still see the Cyclops, so he concludes that it must be nearby. Anyway, off to Vitamin Square. I have nothing to say about the environment other than that I appreciate the abstract feel in the realistic location. Armstrong directed us to this man, Victor Kudo. Now, Recipe for Turnabout has done a fine job at holding player attention, with its clever situations surrounding the crime and introduction of new locations and characters in quick succession. However, I've done a lot of summarizing at this point because nothing worth analyzing has happened quite yet. Until now. Victor Kudo, a very animated man for his age. He's a regular at Tres Bien and has some quirks about him. Remember how I promised I would showcase more music pieces as we go? Here's one for you. Victor Kudo, how sad the melody of this war song. This is a piece that encompasses the loud and snappy tone of Kudo, but also provides a nice contrast with his dumber behavior. Phoenix and Maya try to get information out of him, Cole Phelps style, but nothing really works. He proceeds to yell at pigeons while throwing seeds at them. And worse, he throws bird seeds at people!
Oh my god!
That is amazing. This is the ultimate example of how weird some Ace Attorney characters really are. You can't help but laugh at his behavior. While he's being an absolute jerk to people, he's still pretty funny. This dual tone is reminding me a lot of Justice for All. Armstrong jumps to conclusions by taking Maya as a waitress. Okay. While she's being trained, Phoenix goes to Criminal Affairs to talk to Gumshoe. Good news, the retrial has been approved by Godo, so now we have a fighting chance. It's almost as if Godo isn't as mean as he seems. The developers offered a rather unique conversation between Phoenix and Gumshoe that I have the utmost respect for. Instead of getting concrete information from Gumshoe like before, Phoenix discusses the case and they come to an agreement that Wright will have to head to Tres Bend and figure out what to do on his own. It's nice to see that Phoenix and Gumshoe can discuss the case without clarity. Here's what I mean. Usually we go to Criminal Affairs to gain knowledge, but instead here, we learn more about the case through conversation. Context and discussion is just as helpful for understanding things in real life. So it's nice to have a moment like this that's not filled to the brim with exposition and information. Phoenix finds Maya in her waitress outfit doing her job. Hilariously, Phoenix tastes some of the food and despises it. Armstrong doesn't seem to be around, so the two investigate the kitchen where they find the Magatama and a suspicious-looking bottle in one of Armstrong's collections. At this point, all signs are turning to Armstrong as the killer. Next, we meet Mr. Furio Tigre. That hair. Oh, looks like you're the fake Phoenix around here. In the words of the wise guy, Tigre pretends to be the real Phoenix Wright in front of Phoenix Wright. However, this is actually a rather frightening encounter. Tigre's character is super strong, in that he's terrifying from looks alone. Phoenix doesn't freak out, but is certainly startled. The encounter began because Phoenix notices a damaged scooter at Vitamin Square, and he had to get a closer look. Fast forwarding now, we talk to Gumshoe and learn that the writing on the newspaper was the victim's, Glenn Elg, and that Armstrong has accumulated a debt of $500,000 because of his restaurant's failings. This makes me wonder, what is Glenn Elg's background then? Victor Kudo is questioned by Wright, and we learn something very comedic, as to be expected from this case. Here, just look, people. Phoenix isn't gonna rest there. He wants information, Cole Phelps style. He asks Maya to come over to Vitamin Square. Just watch again, okay? Wow, Mr. Kudo's completely manipulated by Mia wearing the waitress outfit. Finally, some crucial information. Victor Kudo knows a lot about Armstrong's past deeds, being stealing from people and having a shady background overall. This gives Wright and Maya the confidence to try and break his psych locks. Here's the story as we know it now. Glenn Elg was listening to a radio at his table and shouted in excitement when his lottery ticket was called. With Mr. Kudo's statement, the stealing of the Magatama and the kleptomaniac traits of Armstrong lead to this encounter being successful. Godo appears and insults Armstrong Coffee in potentially the most badass appearance I've ever seen, and in this mysterious dialogue tells Mr. Wright that the lottery ticket is a worthless piece of evidence. Time for court. Gumshoe lays the groundwork for Godo and Wright, summarizing the basic details of the case. We learn that there indeed was a tracing of poison on Elg's cup, even though it's a bit obvious. The lottery ticket becomes relevant as Godo presents it to the court. Apparently, Bride had found it, and all that does is give her a motive for killing Elg. Yep, nice job. The judge is being swayed towards the prosecution, as Godo presents another solid piece of evidence, being Maggie's apron. The red substance on Elg's cup allegedly is on her apron as well, though Gumshoe clarifies that it is only ketchup. Godo is very confused though, as he claims there is no red substance at all, even though it's right there! This is a very nice piece of foreshadowing to the final case, and I'm glad it doesn't negatively impact this case in the process, considering Gumshoe can clarify the substance for us. Then, the trial sort of halts. Evidence is missing, and Victor Kudo's appearance is rather vaguely described. In an interesting twist, Godo appears as if he's ready to throw in the towel, but Gumshoe asks for Mr. Kudo to testify. At the recess, Bride is disheartened because of how Gumshoe basically threw her under the bus, but Mr. Wright, being the man that he is, tries to explain that he's only doing his job. And he is. See, there are traces of the Gumshoe-Bride romance returning from the Lost Turnabout, and I enjoy the nods. Alright, I want to get analyzing the rest of the case quickly, so I'm going to fly through this trial. Ready, set, go! Okay, so Victor Kudo testifies that Glenn Elg was wearing an earpiece, but Godo clarifies that it's a small computer monitor the victim wears for work. Yeah, work. Also, Kudo's placement in the restaurant provided no view of the other person except Elg's table, rendering this testimony useless. Godo took it hard and got frustrated. What's funny is that Kudo was basically kicked out of the courtroom by the judge for incompetence. Hilarious, okay, blah, blah, blah. The trial is delayed for more investigation. Phoenix and Maya go Gumshoe. Gumshoe's listening to a radio and Cyclops appear when Wright asks about it. Next stop is Blue Screens Inc., where the protagonists meet Lisa Basil. Okay, we should slow down to discuss her. Her personality is similar to Desiree's in that she's kind and resourceful, which is appreciated. Her design is absolutely incredible, with special mention to the shading and multiple blues being incorporated. Basil allows Mr. Wright to examine Glenn Elg's desk, and here we receive more background information on him. As I said before, I appreciate backstory and character that is given to victims in these games because it's rare we ever receive much about them. Meet with the Tiger is found on his calendar, a dead giveaway of the villain. Cyclops appear when Phoenix questions Basil about this. The girl Armstrong is talking to is from the loan bank Armstrong borrowed all that money from. Mr. Wright learns about the loan bank and the name of the owner. The bank is named Tender Lender and is owned by Furio Tigre. We then meet Viola Cadaverini, a girl who works at Tender Lender as an assistant to Tigre. Viola is a terrifying person, to be blunt. She's polite and calm, but will sneak in morbid dialogue, including death threats. By now, we're used to the tragedy that took place in the past coming into play somehow in each case. And here's the tragedy, delivered in a very interesting way with Viola. Nope! 4 Cyclops! 4! By gosh, we knew it had something to do with her large bandage surrounding her head. But a fatal injury? That's not good at all. Tigre saved her life, according to her, and that's why she doesn't mind serving him coffee and not much else. It's tragic because while it's good that Viola's happy she's alive and all, serving coffee is a sad way to live life. At least if it's what defines you. So far, the writers are onto something. Let's dive into the tragedy soon. Well, first a revelation. Let Gumshoe speak for me. Yikes! Wow, so I like how the developers want me to feel bad for Viola, then to be afraid of her, and then to sympathize with her once again. This sort of trickery is rare in Ace Attorney, and I think we need more of this mind-bending ideas. The only future examples I think of are in the Layton crossover and Dual Destinies, but I'll get back to on that one. In a rather pointless Cyclops section with Basil, we learn that Elg had to pay off debt to Tender Lender, and so he had to meet with Tigre in order to do it. Really, people? I couldn't figure that out on my own? Come on. I mean, I've never ever been one to criticize stories for delivering twists after someone can figure it out clearly, but this is a little too obvious, don't you think? Well, that's a subjective matter. Now, I won't summarize the tragedy, but I'll analyze it after the fact. Please, take a look. Tigray had agreed to pay her $1 million for her operation from the car accident, and I have to say, he's still a coward. However, that's it for the tragedy. Trust me, I have a lot more to say on it later. Tigray gets into a scuffle with Wright and nearly steals all of Wright's hard-earned evidence, but good old Gumshoe saves the day. I love you, Gumshoe. And now the trial. Godo attempts to clear confusion from Kudo's testimony by having Armstrong testify about the scene of the crime. However, the confusion begins once again. Thankfully, Mr. Wright thought of an important point. The waitress Kudo saw serving Elle couldn't have been Maggie Bird. It was discovered through some discussion with Armstrong that Bird was knocked out. Someone disguised themselves as her and took the drink to Elg, and when Elg died, the man across Elg forced Armstrong to hide the body in the kitchen. Yeah, you can see how frightened Armstrong is in all of this, and he swears he is not the murderer. But he wishes not to say who the other man was. Mr. Wright tells the court about the loan issues between Mr. Armstrong and Tigray. With that, Tigray is called to the stand. Alright, home stretch. Tigray denies anything he can, but Mr. Wright properly lays out the motive and situation Tigray was in. Tigray got into a motorcycle accident with Viola. She was the granddaughter of one of the mob bosses, named Bruto Cadaverini, so Tigray had to pay off her expensive operation, or he would probably be killed. Elg's loan comes into this. And yeah, all of those plot points are pretty obvious to the player, even though it's still satisfying to have the court hear it. With that said, Mr. Wright deduces something I never would have thought. Armstrong, Viola, and Tigray all contributed in creating a fake crime scene to fool Victor Kudo and frame Maggie. Jeez. And here is a contrivance done right. What an ending, man! Ugh, Maggie Bird is happy that her name is cleared, and Phoenix tries to show how much Gumshoe helped in making that happening by presenting her a lunch Gumshoe made. Recipe for Turnabout. Is it flawless?
No!
Sometimes the case wants to be plot-centric, and other times it's the opposite. The case's drama doesn't do a good job at having contrast to the case's heavy amount of comedy. And what's worse for Recipe for Turnabout is that PW had already showed that you didn't need heavy amounts of both comedy and drama as long as you were dedicated to doing one well. This is why I hold Turnabout Samurai in higher regard than this case. As I said in 3A number 1, that case was focused on character interaction, with comedy between the main cast. I do not say that in hopes of undermining the darker parts of Turnabout Samurai, because there is plenty of it near the end. However, focus is a concept important to storytelling, and I simply think that Recipe for Turnabout tries way too hard to be a jack of all trades. You know what they say, a jack of all trades, a master of nothing. They really got something going with the motorcycle accident, but no time was spent on it. Why not develop it further? I'm not even sure if I should feel bad for Furio Tigre. I mean, probably not, because he's a killer, but still, they could have played with my emotions more. This was a massive missed opportunity. This entire Reminiscence tragedy, I'm sorry, it just wasn't very well thought out. With that said, this is still a solid case with interesting details that were worth analyzing, but it's no secret as to why this didn't take as long as the Stolen Turnabout. On a more positive note, we are introduced to many new locales and lore to the Ace Attorney series thanks to this case. We have a restaurant, a technology corporation, playground, and a loan bank in addition to the usual places of interest. What's even better are the, and say it with me, characters. Maggie Bird hasn't changed or developed much from the Lost Turnabout, but that's okay considering it's been such a long time since we've seen her. Considering I already hold her in high regard from the previous review, that's more points in favor of this case. In addition to Maggie, I very much appreciate Jean Armstrong, even if he ultimately left little impact on me. Victor Kudo gets my character award for this case. He's not as fleshed out as Luke Atmey was, not even close. But his archetype and design fits niches not explored prior. Furio Tigre is threatening, and that's about it. Weak villain in the greater context of the series, however, not a deal breaker in the slightest. He is perfectly serviceable as the mean copycat he truly is. Viola has about as much development as Furio, but she was way more interesting for me personally. Though there's not much in her favor, and if we analyze anyone else for depth, well, there's Lisa Basil and Glenn Helg, who did have quite a good backstory for a victim. Now hear me out. The characters in Recipe for Turnabout are super good, and this is because of how they add to the melting pot of explored ideas. Sure, Lisa Basil, for example, is incredibly interesting on her own, with no depth, but she's a nice addition to this mix we have, and this goes for all of the characters. This might sound like a no-brainer, but I didn't find many cases strong in variety of character personalities other than a few occasions previously. I will give credit where it's due, so congratulations Recipe for Turnabout on that. A while back I created a poll on the Google Plus Ace Attorney community, and I was asking people to vote on their preferred case, and most people agreed that the Stolen Turnabout is the superior one here. And there were some well-explained reasons as well. Thanks to everyone for voting, by the way. Again, let me be clear, I'm not using other people's opinions to justify mine. I was just curious to see what a section of the Ace Attorney fanbase thought. Alright, we have spent a long time in this video. Please feel free to take a break, stretch, take a nap, eat a snack, I don't know, something. Take a break, alright? I mean, I have links in the timestamps to the different parts of the video, but take it easy, okay? Alright? I'll see you in a bit. Thank you for staying even just this long. Please, enjoy a nice break, and I'll see you after the intermission.
It's nice to rest your eyes and maybe go outside. Grab a book and get some air. So what are you waiting for? Bum, 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 bum. Why not take a quick break? Tune the radio. There's chores to do, there's leaves to rake. Strum the old banjo. You can practice your Lindy Hop. Bum, 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 bum. And maybe later sing with your barbershop. Why not take a little quick break and come back for more? Then come back for more. Or please come back for more.
And we're back. No time to waste, ladies and gentlemen. Flashing back to days of old with Miss Mia Fey. I present Case 4, Turnabout Beginnings. This is one of my favorite case intros in the entire series. Here is where we can see Takumi's vintage feel style being implemented in full. I love the sounds that are used and the blurring between the characters, and how the screen cuts away during the gunshot, but comes back as we see the body fall into the large abyss below. It's also beyond cool to see Phoenix comfortably at night, reading his computer, learning about this case. Mia's very first case, in fact. A client on death row. So, this is basically how the crime went, right? No? Suit yourself. From the intro, we see a policewoman, a man, and a girl on a bridge far above the ground. Interesting. I feel so bad for Mia. Her client could very well be guilty this time, and the high pressure of the situation must be killing her inside. Again, we saw her nervous in Turnabout Memories, but this is her absolute first case, so the tension and the fear is much, much worse. Mia's client is Terry Falls, a man who was convicted of many crimes before this one. He's very scared and frightened, in a way that makes me rather sad, especially when he bites on his ball and chain. It's just, there's something not right here. The developers found a way to have the player feel something very innocent in this man, yet his records are the worst we've ever seen! And what is Mia supposed to do with these emotions? Ah, Prosecutor Godo is relevant here? Wait. Diego Armando! And right here is where every first-time player has an explosion occur in their brain. Mia and Diego are dating. They are both defense attorneys, and this man was poisoned by Dahlia after this case and before Turnabout Memories. Again, boom! It'll be interesting to see how Diego becomes Godo, but that's a long ways off. Diego has this charming personality that helps Mia focus and relax. His facial expressions are a huge help with this. Everyone needs someone like Diego in their lives, you know? someone who can keep calm no matter what. This is the judge's younger brother. Mind you, this is not his debut appearance, but Turnabout Beginnings is his largest role in the series. There's really nothing to analyze about him, but I will say he's more serious and more in touch than our usual judge. I also prefer his character design to his older brother, but that's neither here nor there. The prosecutor is also a huge surprise. Miles Edgeworth at his debut trial. Get on with the plot, Gavin! I apologize, but there's so much to say about these characters. We have to slow down for a minute or two. It's important to note that in PW, we were told that Miles had a perfect record before losing to Phoenix in Turnabout Sisters. This should tell the player, as long as they've been paying attention, as they begin Case 4, that Mia will have to lose. We'll have to see how this plays out though, because once again, TNT is full of surprises and continues to blow away expectations. Miles is wearing a suit inspired by Manfred von Karma, and we can see not firsthand, but secondhand, how von Karma raised him after Gregory died. Oh boy, you might as well call him Miles von Karma. He is ruthless, but even more so than in Turnabout Sisters. Rather than giving us a blast to the past with his behavior in PW, we see Edgeworth at his absolute worst morally. He is cocky, sure, but he goes as far as calling Mia I'm not even gonna say. I love his character here. Don't misunderstand me, he's being terrible, but from a writing standpoint, it's also very well done. Mia is less experienced than she was in Turnabout Memories, and the stakes are higher than ever. Diego Armando's relevance is shocking, and the added principle of this case taking place in the past makes everything so intriguing. The events that take place during Turnabout Beginnings will undoubtedly affect the future of the series. With all of these elements at play, I want to jump the shark and tell you viewers something. Turnabout Beginnings is one of the greatest cases in the trilogy. I will do my best to highlight its pure strengths as we go, and then I'll do an analytical overview. Justice for all? Eat your heart out! Atmosphere is back and adds to the feel more than ever. Edgeworth describes the scene of the crime. For those who are not aware, Eagle River is well known for its powerful current. Most bodies that fall in are never recovered. If that doesn't leave an impact, just rewatch the case intro with that knowledge in hand. Look at the girl fall! What a horrible way to die! The bridge is named Dusky Bridge, by the way. Valerie Hawthorne was ready to shoot Terry Falls as he kidnapped her sister, Dahlia Hawthorne. Dahlia fell into Eagle River. Wait, hold on, that's not right. See, this case springs so many questions to mind. Dahlia survived the fall and the ride in the river? Yeah, right. But maybe it is possible. The trial after this event took place saw Valerie Hawthorne rightfully testifying against Mr. Falls, and now the crime directly related to this case, Mr. Falls is accused of killing Valerie Hawthorne with a knife at Dusky Bridge, upon requesting to meet her there. This is all delivered to the court by the lovable Detective Gumshoe. Meanwhile, Mia tries to figure out what to do. Diego takes a sip of coffee and tries to keep her at bay. The judge questions the validity of Gumshoe's information, but without seconds' notice, Edgeworth asks Gumshoe to continue. More facts and evidence are presented and validated by Edgeworth. One key piece of evidence is Valerie's scarf, which she supposedly had at the scene of the crime due to Mr. Falls' request, but it wasn't with her dead body in the trunk. Something odd occurs in this trial. Miles mentions a witness to the crime, but Gumshoe assists him by saying that the witness refuses to testify. What the heck? Mia starts to lose grasp of the trial, and Diego reminds her that every contradiction is based in some kind of lie. Mia starts to channel her later behavior in Turnabout Memories. The more demanding side of her shows. Mia demands we see this mysterious witness at once. Oddly, Miles lets it happen. Hello, Melissa Foster. The player knows this will all be some giant lie, but boy is it interesting. Let's watch some of this play out.
Objection!
isn't that swell? Melissa had room for one picture, and it's rather useless if you ask me. And let me guess, Edgeworth can validate this. According to Melissa, Valerie and Mr. Falls physically fought each other, so she called the police. The dire atmosphere of Dusky Bridge is heightened to a whole new level when we are presented a map of the area. Melissa claims to have run away in the opposite direction and was stabbed. However, the bridge is completely destroyed on that side. This is one of the dangerous places I've ever heard of. Ever. Just think about this. Mia is more comfortable with the case, so she strikes hard. With critical reasoning, she accused Melissa Foster as the true killer. The girl proceeded to pass out, and the judge demanded a recess. Mr. Falls thanks Mia for working hard, and Diego presents information on Terry Falls. The death row defendant admits to having kidnapped Dahlia Hawthorne in the event that took place at Dusky Bridge 5 years ago. Wow! Just wow! That is one of the most evil plans I've ever heard! So much is revealed on this recess, and we have to understand character motivation. As the player, it is our job to understand all sides of the situation. It goes without saying that Valerie was a traitor to the other two. I'm not justifying kidnapping people, and especially not a fake kidnapping to make money off of jewelry, but shooting people's not okay either. There has to be some strange backstory to these characters we don't learn about. Heck, we don't even learn about this to the fullest extent in Case 5, but I feel that Mr. Falls and Hawthorne's sisters must have had horrible childhoods. How is it acceptable that these people behave this way? It's inhuman, it's unbelievable. The case becomes more clear with this information. The reason Mr. Falls asked Valerie to meet him at the bridge was so that he could learn why she betrayed him. Fair enough. Makes sense. Melissa's statement started to make little sense though, at least to Mia and Diego, even though Miles saw no problems whatsoever. He's just sitting there letting it fly. Mia claims that Dahlia is alive and well, being disguised as Melissa Foster. This helped prove Dahlia's motive for killing her sister. Dahlia lies through her teeth by claiming she was pushed into the river by Falls in the encounter, but that's stupid for multiple fatal reasons. But again, it might be true. Edgeworth made himself look like a moron by claiming the water level could have been higher 5 years ago. I mean, no. Just no. Dahlia's motive for killing Valerie is established, but Mia doesn't have the perfect piece of evidence to prove the motive, and we know that we would have to have the diamond. The tension is rising, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Falls takes the stand and testifies that he met Valerie and not Dahlia in the encounter. This should sound very familiar to Phoenix and Turnabout Memories. And who was responsible for what happened in the case? Dahlia. Then, we learn about the bottle necklace. This gets me so mad. Taking a sip, he coughs up blood. He began to explain that as a part of the promise they made, he and Dahlia had agreed that if one ever lost faith in another, that person would have to drink the poison in the bottle and face death. And he didn't know that. This is horrible. I don't think I can really analyze this. Just watch. And that is all for the case. Turnabout Beginnings is a masterpiece. There are zero flaws with this case. It's just the right length and has a very nice pace to it. Mia's character doesn't shine through until her second case, but for good reason. We have a Mia Fey that's similar to how Mr. Wright handled his beginnings, if you will. With that said, Diego Armando is extremely likable, and in a more sincere way than his future incarnation. He constantly helped out, with highlighting contradictions for Mia to find. His words of advice are so quotable, especially the last one, being one of the most famous quotes in the entire series. The only time a lawyer can cry is when it's all over. As he breaks the coffee mug and blood flows out of his hand. I've done enough praising Edgeworth in this case, and I think Dolly as well as Mr. Falls speak for themselves. I also think I covered the atmosphere as much as I needed to. The case was quite short for its placement in the game, but this was most likely due to Terry Falls' suicide and not a lack of ideas. So what's left? Well, the conclusion of the case. It goes without saying that Mia and Edgeworth have Mr. Falls' suicide on their conscience for the rest of their lives. This will haunt them forever. As for Mr. Falls, it's truly tragic what he decided to do. He was so loyal to his girlfriend that he killed himself in order to keep their promise. I don't know if it's clear whether he knew that he would die from the poison, but it was certainly... I can't analyze it. Of course, there were malicious intentions with that promise, and we'll have to see how Diego fell for it. Because that is what happened, right? Well, we know he survived as well, and we can assume that the poisoning changed his personality into Godot. However, there are still going to be many surprises in a case that will conclude all plot threads from Trials and Tribulations, as well as conclude all plot threads from PW and JFA. Alright, I need all of your attention for this message. Bridge of the Turnabout is the most complex case in the entire series. There are so many little details that all do matter at the end of the day. But I cannot cover everything. I have lots of more concrete and in the air kind of things to say about this case. You know, analytical things to say. I will be actively trying to avoid summarizing to the point where it might become confusing. Please understand, I can't have this review be 5 million hours long because of summarization. Again, please understand that if I miss something small or crucial, I know what I missed. Thank you. And now, the finale of the Phoenix Wright trilogy. It's an honor that I've been able to analyze these cases thus far, and I'm very fortunate to be able to do it with this one as well. Here we go. Case 5, Bridge to the Turnabout. The intro speaks for itself, but we must appreciate it fully. We hear the Currane Village theme, and we see an oddly similar statue to the one in Lordly Taylor's basement. This is Amy Faye. The Shishi... I'm just gonna call it the seven-branch sword, if that's okay, is used as an extended metaphor about the destiny of life. From the pacing to the seriousness of it all, this is once again a home run for a case intro. Pearl and Maya show Nick a magazine that detailed a special training course for them to do. This is awesome! I love how the two of them are not only determined to advance their spirit channeling skills, but this creates a perfect setup for what the case is based on. I used this picture in the JFA analysis to demonstrate the Fae Saga, and as I hinted at in that video, Bridge of the Turnabout is the final part. So, with great character motivation and a well-executed setup, the three of them decide to travel all the way up the dangerous and cold mountains to reach Hazakura Temple. Wait. Phoenix recognized Dahlia Hawthorne on the magazine, and this sparks curiosity as to her identity. After all, Phoenix witnessed her being sentenced to jail years ago. The gang head all the way up to Hazakura Temple. Yes, I need to stress just how daunting of a task it is to get all the way up there. Near the entrance, we meet Sister Bikini. It's her temple name. While that may be off-putting, Sister Bikini seems to be a nice and kind lady. I want to stop for a moment and mention that Bridge of the Turnabout starts off without a murder at all. At least, not in the moment of the case. I really liked how progressive this was in Stolen Turnabout, and I think it works here for one reason. This case has a lot of backstory and information that is necessary for the player to understand. Everyone is surprised inside the temple itself, as Pearl gets to meet her favorite child book author, Elise Dionim. I know I said I would be glossing over lots of details for the sake of time, but that'll be more towards the middle of the case. Elise Dionim. Wow. First of all, you can see her innocence from her smile alone. A nice lady who happens to be Pearl's idol is integral to the temple. Elise has this mystical aura surrounding her, and I truly believe that she's probably one of the most morally perfect in the series. She's just so calm and easy to talk to. And let's not forget about her theme. Please take a listen. It's so calm, but the synthesizers in the background and the descending line of notes from the softer instruments give this little touch of sadness. Elise Dionim's theme is easily one of my favorite pieces in gaming. It sums up how I feel about this case and all. And honestly, this is the first piece of music that enters my mind when I think about Bridge of the Turnabout. Miss Dionim offers Pearls the ability to help her set for dinner, and Pearl accepts without question. Meanwhile, Nick and Maya decide to continue with their exploration. Unlike the moment with Luke at me, I would be more than trusting of having Pearl stay with Elise. Nice contrast, developers. The two travel across a bridge to the inner temple, and by the way, this map is really important for understanding the mountain's layout. Wow, these views are incredible. You know, I have to break my promise about low discussion of atmosphere once again. The atmosphere of the mountains, and especially Hazakura Temple, are just so pure. And we must listen to Hazakura's temple theme as well. The art design in the outside areas does a nice job of showing depth of field, which provide a believable, gigantic area. Heck, I'd go as far to say that Turnabout Samurai atmosphere has been succeeded with the same ideas. That case had an isolated movie studio setting that was in the middle of quiet woods. This setting takes the isolation to a whole new level. I cannot describe what exactly makes the characters feel so isolated here on a visual standpoint alone, but there's something magical about how alone the characters feel. It just makes you stop and say, wow, look at where we are. At the inner temple, Phoenix and Maya meet a girl that's dressed similarly to Sister Bikini and looks a lot like Dahlia Hawthorne. She introduces herself as Iris and has a lovely, lovely aura around her. Phoenix is stunned because of the whole Dahlia appearance thing, and Maya mistakenly takes this as romantic. Well, she's not completely wrong, as we'll see at the end of this case. Inside the inner temple, a picture of Misty Faye hangs on the wall. Next is meeting Larry Butts, who has just become a painter. Next! After a meeting with everyone at Hazakura Temple, time passes by. Mr. Wright asks Elise where Pearl went, but she isn't quite sure. Phoenix and Iris meet again, and the two have an awkward dialogue session with each other. Then Mr. Wright takes a daring leap and asks her questions. One of them being if she went to the same college he did, Ivy University. Iris gives Phoenix her hood to protect him from evil spirits as he tries to go to the bathroom. See, the player can deduce from this action and her expression that Iris is intentionally hiding information from Phoenix. At least none of her responses are complete lies. Never mind! 5 psych locks. Okay. Iris rings the bells outside as it is now nighttime, and a scream is projected. Elise Dionum is found dead under the 7-branch sword, and we have to witness Phoenix and Sister Bikini screaming at each other to try and call the police. That tension, jeez. Oh, and watch this scene unfold. Phoenix dies! Mr. Wright, the strong-willed and morally correct man we all know and love, took a risk during a lightning storm on a burning bridge. He did it for justice. The bridge collapses and Mr. Wright falls into the Eagle River. If it wasn't clear yet, the temple grounds is the same location of where Turnabout Beginnings was centered around. So, we have the terribly rapid river and dusky bridge. I don't even know what to analyze this moment for. I could say that it's pure genius because it's not expected, the player's emotions are being played with, the shot with Larry getting smaller and smaller, sickening to the stomach, the fact that, for most of the moment the screen is black, and that they had the guts to end part 1 of the investigation right there. You know what? I think I can say this moment is pure genius. I just listed why without even thinking. I cried during my first playthrough, and I'd say it's still a tearjerker to this day. We know Phoenix is gonna live, but still, the temple grounds have a lot of mysteries, events, and other things to be solved. I have to say, the amount of tension and thrill this case offers cannot be matched by even Farewell My Turnabout. Some would say Turnabout for Tomorrow has more. Wait, no!
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ! Fuck me! Jesus fucking get the fuck out of here! Jesus. It's alright, it's okay. I'm fine. It's fine.
Larry calls Miles Edgeworth to help fill in for Mr. Wright. Miles checked in with Phoenix at the hospital and was given the Magatama and his attorney's badge. Let it be remembered that this is Miles' first appearance in Trials and Tribulations. According to Takumi, he wasn't just thrown in, but he was planned to be playable so that they could appeal to the fans. This I have no problem with. Iris admits to Edgeworth that she knew Mr. Wright, but she had deceived him in the past, and that's why she stayed away from him. Is this actually Dahlia? Okay, no, she's not, but Could you imagine if Bridge of the Turnabout had a plot twist where this was Dahlia the whole time? Meaning that a killer was being defended? It could have been very, very interesting, but regardless, this case handles Dahlia great anyway. The rest of the investigation centers around Edgeworth figuring out more about the case and the characters, while the player gets to see him adjust to Mr. Wright's job and how Edgeworth can be a lot more snarky. Before we head to the trial, there are a few important notes. 1. Gumshoe clarifies how and why the bridge collapsed. 2. Sister Bikini has an alibi with returning to Hazakura Temple to take a bath because of her bad back. She claims to have witnessed Iris stabbing Elise with the 7-branch sword. 3. Larry was at Heavenly Hall waiting for Iris to appear because he had written her a letter. It's just Larry up to his romantic shenanigans as usual. Larry then claims he saw something incredible, but Cyclops appear. Miles Edgeworth responds by saying, screw it, see you in court. Miles arranged for the judge's brother to oversee the trial, as he would not recognize him, because, well, Edgeworth is going to pretend to be a defense attorney. This is just amazing. It's a contrivance for sure. Well, okay, fine. It's a fine contrivance, it's hilarious, great, okay. But who's prosecuting then?
Objection!
Whoa! Miles Edgeworth versus Franziska von Karma. After losing to Mr. Wright many times in the past, I'm sure this is an even better deal for Franziska, proving to her brother that she is superior. This makes up for the contrivance with the judge in my eyes, because the reason for having Franziska come back is very, very good. I won't go into specifics, but the banter and discussion between Miles and Franziska in this trial is exactly what you'd hope it would be. It's a contest to see who can bicker the most. Edgeworth gains more appreciation for Phoenix than ever, as he slowly gains more confidence in his defending abilities. Meanwhile, Franziska seems to have replaced some of her anger from Justice for All to a more playful kind of attitude. Sister Bikini's memory of the crime is really hazy, and the judge doesn't waste anyone's time as he scolds her for wasting everybody's time. Sister Bikini claims that Elise fell out of her room before she was stabbed in the courtyard, but Miles destroys this. Miles and Franziska start to pick apart the testimony even more, but then Franziska starts to take a more aggressive approach. With this, Miles deduces that the murder weapon may not have actually been the sword. Sister Bikini mentions that the killer could have used a nearby snowmobile to quickly head over to Eagle River and throw the body in the river. After the night's snowfall comes into question, the judge asks if there's any other witness who can describe the movements of a snowmobile in this area. Larry takes the stand after a quick recess. So the rest of the trial gives me major flashbacks to Wendy Oldbag's testimony in Farewell My Turnabout. Larry's testimony is just as intentionally confusing as hers, so here's the main idea. Considering that Larry is under the name Laurice Dionim and has taken upon more artistic hobbies, he claims that he drew the bridge while it was burning, and he actually supplies evidence of this. He also claims to have seen Iris flying above the bridge. And the trial got an extension. What, are you surprised? We then transition to Hottie Clinic, where we see Mr. Wright and aha! Phoenix was researching Mia's first case at this point in time. This is actually a pretty nice surprise. Mr. Wright picked himself up, dusted himself off, and traveled all the way back up the mountain to thank Edgeworth and continue the investigation from where he left off. Gumshoe tells Phoenix that he's working on repairing the bridge. Franziska interacts with Phoenix briefly, and then Sister Bikini drops a hint at one of the biggest plot twists in the series. Perhaps it won't shock everyone, but it's no secret to how big of a deal that is in-universe. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Franziska takes pleasure in leading Phoenix on his investigation. After the bridge is fixed, they cross to reunite with Pearl. Phew, glad she's okay. Pearl then insults Franziska in hilarious ways. Inside the inner temple, everyone hopes to finally reunite with Maya Fey, but there's a psych lock on the door, and the scroll of Misty Fae has been vandalized. What the heck? Then, an encounter I never dreamed would have happened. Godo and Francisca have a mini argument, and Godo uses words such as princess while talking to Francisca. Now, I have to stop the review and talk about political controversy types of things just for 1 second, because it's been very prevalent in the fandom for years. Many Ace Attorney fans have claimed Godo to be sexist because of this encounter. Well, is he? No. Godo always refers to people by other names than their own. And yes, he is treating Francisca like dirt, but he also treats Phoenix and the judge the same way. He's just using colorful language to say, move out, I'm the prosecutor now. It's no secret that Godo's acting rudely, but these are not, and I repeat, not sexist remarks. And if any of you still believe he's sexist,
how could you be so utterly incompetent?
Then Godo breaks the news that Maya is most likely locked in the Sacred Cavern right in front of them. This sucks. There may be no assassin this time, but due to the isolation of the environment, the situation is just as dire as it was in Farewell My Turnabout. Phoenix, Francisca, and Gumshoe find the garden and pick up some evidence. Using this evidence, Mr. Wright goes back to Sister Bikini with Francisca and concludes that Misty Fae and Elise Dionum were the same person. Alright, we have to slow down here. So what does this mean? Well, Maya and Pearl, who have been wishing to see Misty their whole lives, have her permanently removed from them. And we get more direct connection to the previous Fae Saga cases. And let me remind you what those are. That's Turnabout Sisters and Reunion and Turnabout. An earthquake happens which instantly startles Phoenix. He quickly travels across the temple to see if Edgeworth is okay, as we learned in PW about his childhood trauma. And unfortunately, we also learn that Iris has vanished completely. What is going on? This case, crazy stuff. Back to the inner temple. Okay, it's really bothering me that Iris is lying about so many things. Yes, it's understood why, but that doesn't make the sheer amount of Cyclops in this case any less obnoxious. That is one thing about Bridge of the Turnabout I can easily critique. There's just way too many Cyclops. So yes, I'm taking some points off for that. And now for the most interesting plot dump about the Fae clan. Morgan Fay versus Misty Fay. Now, quickly remember when I discussed the Stolen Turnabout, there was a part of a conversation with Phoenix, Maya, and Pearl that I instantly wrote off as unnecessary, but later I realized that it actually was very interesting and helpful. That conversation showed us that the Fay clan had internal struggles and terror. In PW, we learned about the external struggles with the Fay clan, Red, White, and the media with how they treated Misty Fay and spirit channelers. With Iris being Morgan's daughter, I feel that there is even more reason to be skeptical of Iris. Or should I say, more skeptical of Iris's identity. At this point, the writers are trying to say, "See, it's been Dahlia the whole time!" Anyways, Phoenix and Miles put together a lot of this information, and they eventually create a Professor Layton-like deduction. Iris has a twin sister being Dahlia. Even though Dahlia had died due to her conviction, she could have been channeled through spirit channeling. Apparently, our thoughts on Dahlia's motive for the kidnapping from 11 years ago was all wrong. Iris confesses that it was done out of revenge for their father, who I won't touch on because of just how sad it is. He is quite the sad excuse of a human being. Unfortunately, we don't have a name to go off of or any details, but we can connect the dots between him, Morgan Fay, and Pearl. I know I've been summarizing for quite a bit, but we have a little more to go. Do you remember how at the end of Reunion and Turnabout, Morgan Fay said that she would still get her revenge? Well, this pisses me off, but Morgan sent a letter to Pearl asking her to go after Dahlia, but Pearl failed to read the instructions she gave. Morgan! Such a well-done villain, by the way. Ladies and gentlemen, all that's left is the final trial. Even though I've been rolling for so long, I can't believe this is almost over. I think you guys deserve an analysis on the final investigation segment. Well, for starters, it is quite cluttered. The Fey information should have been spread across both investigation days, and then there's Iris. Don't get me wrong, I find everything surrounding Iris to be interesting. And that's good, because you can tell Takumi really wanted the player to care about Iris. But Iris is such a huge part of this case, and Sister Bikini knows way more about the Fey lore than Phoenix does. These characters have great time to shine in this case, and they help with the overall direction of this analysis. You know, gearing towards the characters. With that said, this investigation segment is inflating to the high heavens. Again, don't get me wrong, I'm mostly positive about the investigation segment, but there are many things wrong with it. Even if you think I'm being too harsh, I hope you could tell that I was very enthusiastic about it. So yeah. Well, this is it. The final trial. Iris takes the stand and right off the bat is completely honest with Phoenix. All I have to say is thank you, Iris. We can finally move on and defend her. Oh, Maya is still locked away. I'm so sorry, Phoenix. If I were him in this situation, I would have just given up at this point. That is one thing I have truly glanced over, and I apologize that I have. It's so true that Phoenix Wright has been the victim of this case, from nearly dying, to losing sight of Maya and Pearl, to worrying about Edgeworth and the earthquake, to being scolded by Godo. It's been a hell of a ride for this poor man. We started to learn about Maya's encounter on that fateful night. Iris claims that Maya Fey killed Misty Fey out of self-defense in the garden. Let me remind you that this is on the other side of the bridge where Phoenix was during the lightning storm. Godo is at probably his most angry as he yells at Iris to keep talking. Okay, maybe angry isn't the best word, but something is off about him right now. Okay, I can't see you, but raise your hand if you believe that Misty Fey would kill her daughter. It's gotten awfully quiet, hasn't it? Yeah. Iris! This is where it gets interesting. I like how Phoenix is unable to disprove Maya as the killer, And I say this at the time of the trial we are examining because the judge asks Iris to discuss how she altered the crime scene. We are literally forced to move on to the next subject, and it's a clever way of providing some doubt to the player. Iris seemingly lies when she claims that she carried Misty's dead body across the bridge. Our smart attorney reminds the court that the bridge was on fire at this time. So, using Larry's drawing, he turns it upside down. Mr. Wright concludes that the only way for Misty's body to have made it across is if she swung like a pendulum below Dusky Bridge. So, how about that revelation? Makes a lot of sense, right?
You serious?
Misty Faye swinging under the bridge like a pendulum is BS. I'm going to need your patience to explain why, though. Please bear with me here. I've been dying to explain this for years. Taking a look at Turnabout Big Top, the writers tried to suspend your disbelief with what Mo saw, but the game rewarded you for staying true to the logic of Ace Attorney. What do I mean by logic of the Ace Attorney series? Let me expand on this by restating what I said in the JFA analysis and by adding a connection to PW. In Turnabout Sisters, the idea of spirit mediums existing in a series about court was not an easy idea to swallow. PW was fairly realistic up until that point, so if done poorly, the reveal of spirit mediums could be off-putting. Thanks to PW's excellent writing, however, the game softly and slowly introduced the idea. Maya gives more details to Nick as the two continue to talk, and what helps the player get behind all of this is how shocked Phoenix himself is at hearing such a revelation. Back to Turnabout Big Top. Unlike the reveal of spirit mediums in PW, it was never, ever established before Big Top that humans could fly. Therefore, it's a good thing that the game slaps this theory in the face. So, the whole point of the building up to the fact that Max could fly, only to crush that theory, is for the thrill of finding out what exactly Mo saw. What did he see? If Max wasn't there, how did that happen? It's an interesting way of developing this series' logic. So now that you have some good examples of the logic in the series, let's look at why the pendulum fails. My problem isn't the luck involved for Misty to cross the gap. No. Coincidences happen after all. The problem here is that we were never told about human physics working this way. With 2 ropes it might work, but with 4, her body would snap halfway across. And even if there were 2 ropes, why would someone think this would work? Honestly, who would try this? If this scenario was recreated in real life, it wouldn't work for mathematical reasons. So, having no soft implementation like PW makes this make no sense. Is it a small critique of Bridge of the Turnabout? Yes, it is. I know I talked about it for a long time, but I really wanted to bring up all those connections. I guess I can't be too harsh on Phoenix for this line of thinking though, because I'm not sure how else you would have continued the trial. Anyways, those are my 2 cents. Pressing on, Iris claims she has no recollection of this elaborate scenario, which means we've hit a wall in terms of who moved Misty's body. Mr. Wright, realistically, creates a conclusion that will go down in history as one of his greatest. The person who did all of this was Dahlia Hawthorne. Realizing her loss, she reveals herself. Dahlia reveals her plan was to kill Maya in order to make Pearl become the next master, which is simply a direct order from Morgan Fay. However, at the garden, she was attacked and lost conscious. But Dahlia was not finished with her story. She locked Iris away in the secret cavern and tells the court that Maya jumped into the river out of guilt. Holy Jesus. Now, some would argue that Farewell My Turnabout is a darker case than this one. And even though it's not important to quality, I think Bridge of the Turnabout is a little bit darker. It's moments like this where I feel a greater impact. When the player considers the atmosphere of the environment, the high stakes, there's more room for dark undertones than in Justice for All's final case. Phoenix is devastated at this point, but Goto's human side reaches out and lends him some helpful advice. Phoenix slams the desk and asks Dahlia, who is she currently corrupting? A revelation that the Stolen Turnabout would blush at. Dahlia has entered Maya Fey herself. This puts Dahlia into true rage. Pearl channels Mia Fey for a few final remarks. what can I say? It's a truly impactful speech that deserves an applause. Dahlia Hawthorne may have failed at achieving her goals fully, many times along the way, but she still devastated the lives of many. It doesn't help that these are characters that we've come to love and adore. Mia doesn't hold back. She's had this anger in her for too long. Dahlia may never be erased forever due to her spirit channeling abilities, but she will live forever in shame for how she failed to be an inhuman monster, and thank goodness for it. And finally, Maya is back. Time for a recess. Iris admitted to assisting Dahlia in the crime that was relevant in Turnabout Beginnings. There's a decent reason for this though, as they are sisters and they had hard childhoods, as I alluded to earlier. And Iris assisted the killer of the crime relevant to this case, but she will not reveal who that was. Well, this is it, ladies and gentlemen. The final decision of the trial awaits. Godo has Maya testify. He's at his most blunt yet. Maya, under so much stress and fear, slips up. A man attacked her. A man. And she saw a glowing light? It's Godo! Oh my god! Well, the revelation isn't proven yet by any means, but let's see how Mr. Wright comes to this point, and how the battle plays out. It's appropriate we play a fitting piece of music for this battle. Beethoven, thank you. Phoenix asked for the lights of the court to be turned off, and to the judge's surprise, the light of Godo's visor is present in the most obvious fashion possible. Godo congratulates Mr. Wright for his deduction, but Maya cries, "No, you're wrong, Mr. Wright!" But it doesn't matter, for Mr. Wright remembered something very, very important. Godo could not see the color red, as was evident in Recipe for Turnabout. So, Godo did not clean up the writing of Maya's name. Maya once again goes to Godo's defense. But why? Maya, you should be a little more selfish here. Regardless, Phoenix deduces that Godo was at the Inner Temple before Dusky Bridge collapsed. With that revelation set, Godo makes an objection and claims that he was not involved with Pearl or Morgan whatsoever, as that would explain how he was at the Inner Temple through specific detail. But our brilliant attorney was not finished, for he finally found the opportunity to deliver the news. Godo has direct connection to Mia Fey, which means that Godo could easily have a sense of what all the drama is about regarding the Fey clan. But before this, Phoenix claimed that Godo knew about Morgan's plan all along. Boom! One after another! Phoenix Wright nails Godo down, and as shocking as it is to have him be responsible for all of this, he does not back down. Once again, Godo is at a new form of blunt and defensiveness. Gone are the poems. Gone are the metaphors. This is about defending himself over a serious crime. Now, Godo is heavily criticized by some fans as being sexist because of this as well. Here's the situation. You were in a relationship and you were essentially dead for months. You come back, and your lover is dead. In that time frame, Phoenix is the only one there with Mia. You see what I'm getting at? While it's obvious that Phoenix couldn't prevent Mia's death, we saw it happen, we saw he was in the other room, we know he couldn't. and I think it's implied that Goto understands that. Only Phoenix will take the blame though, and I feel that Goto isn't sad that Phoenix couldn't protect her because, you know, she's female. It's because she was his lover. To make this even more simple, all you need to do to understand this is that it's natural for Goto to be saying these things in this scenario. He's not correct on many things here, but because there's emotional justification, how is this a problem? How dare this character not be a Jerry Sue? If Mia was in a coma and Goto was dead, I feel that the speech given to Wright would have been the same. So at the end of this day, it's understandable why Goto says this to Phoenix, and no, it is not a sexist kind of speech. Mini rant aside, Phoenix exposes the plan that Goto conducted with Misty Faye. Everything Misty and Goto tried to do was in efforts of protecting the people they loved. Goto wants Mia's successors to be safe, and he cares about Maya. And for the same token, I don't think it demands an explanation as to why Misty would care. Morgan Fay, many would argue, is the most manipulative backseat villain in the series, as she was the reason that Misty got ready to strike. Unfortunately, things didn't end well for her. This plan truly says a lot about Misty and Goto's character, and it nearly brings me to tears. Mr. Wright presses on by attempting to stack more logical reasoning against Goto, but his connection to evidence is lacking in many areas. After a few minor failures, Goto mocks Mr. Wright in a way, saying that Mia would have solved the case by now. Where would the killer hide his wound? This is it, Mr. Wright. And the wound is behind Goto's mask. Perfect. It makes so much sense. But first, the player reads Goto's internal thoughts. As the explanation I gave alluded to earlier, Goto explains why he hates Phoenix and confesses to everything. Goto can be sympathized with for a few reasons. For one, the goal was not to murder Misty Faye, and as, you know, that would be kind of stupid for Goto. His malice was toward Dahlia. Now, please understand me, he is still a killer, and shall perish because of it. However, we have to understand why he did what he did. I could never ever hate Goto for his actions, and I don't think you should either. We simply need to understand him and accept the bitter truth, if you will. Goto's wound opens as he cries, because it truly is all over for him. And if you think the case is over, you're wrong. There's something so touching, I don't even know if I can analyze it, so I'll just summarize it instead like a loser. Iris confesses to Mr. Wright that she disguised as her sister while they were dating all those years ago. It is so uplifting. Man. Mr. Wright is pleased to hear this. Everyone was glad the case had concluded, but Pearl was still missing. However, she is actually safe and sound back at the Inner Temple. Bridge to the Turnabout is an incredible case that manages to tie up loose ends from all parts of the Phoenix Wright trilogy. It's a super strong case with massive stakes and huge revelations unveiled. The atmosphere of the temple grounds is at a straight up JFA kind of level, and you can't help but think about the complexity of the case was, well, warranted. Bridge to the Turnabout is the hugest Ace Attorney case that I've reviewed thus far, and I feel like it ends with a universal feeling of, wow. If you remember back to my JFA analysis, I said that after playing Farewell My Turnabout for the first time, I never saw a future case topping it. And to my surprise, the Bridge of the Turnabout almost did it. Almost did it. Yeah, I know that's really disappointing for many of you out there, but there are too many issues with this case for me to place it above Justice for All's finale, even though the strong points are at an all-time high. And that last point shouldn't be underestimated. The case suffers from its sheer complexity in some instances. Many of the plot points and revelations overlap each other at different moments throughout this massive case. Sometimes things get a little too confusing, which is understandable but a little frustrating when I am trying to enjoy the case. Miles and Francisca feel like they are included simply because it's a send-off to the trilogy, and even though I woefully enjoyed their presences, it feels a little forced. When you stop to think about the case, it's really not that polished, as you can probably tell, and the icing on the cake of cons is how contrived a lot of the Cyclox sections are. There are too many of them. At some point, you've got to stop with those. Now, before you call me a hater, even though I clearly praised the case already, here are more positives. Once again, the atmosphere is incredible, and the case does an excellent job tying up Trials and Tribulations as well as the entire trilogy together. But the tension. So many depressing and sad moments are here to be experienced, with intense moments of dread that elevate them. Whether you include Phoenix nearly dying, or the many times of struggle in the courtroom, Bridge of the Turnabout offers the intense thrill we all love, but at a new record, and that's why this case stands out. The bar has been placed so high by cases like this and Farewell My Turnabout that once again, I wonder if anything can top these two. So yes, despite all of its problems, I hold Bridge to the Turnabout as the second greatest case in the trilogy. But really, comparing these things, it doesn't really matter that much, at least not in an analysis. And one last bit of praise is for Dahlia Hawthorne. She stands as one of the backbone characters this time around, and even with her fake personality being a cliche trope for a villain, she still impresses me with her evil nature. I can understand that her father treated her poorly, but you cannot defend her actions in the slightest. And that's what I love about Dahlia. She's so evil that you might as well hide behind the defense bench when she looks at you. I also have to give her credit for having such a well-organized plan, and she did indeed ruin lives. With that said, she failed hard multiple times, and thank goodness for that. That's it for Bridge to the Turnabout, folks. Overall, Trials and Tribulations is a more flawed package than Justice for All in many ways, but what puts TNT on top is simply for how the game's high points are the highest the series has seen yet. The depth to the story, fantastic scenarios and characters, with a good amount of atmosphere, is what truly defines the game. TNT is the first of many Ace Attorney games to have cases that are part of a larger deal, being an overarching story that reaches a conclusion in the final case. This game's story is deep enough to make it feel rewarding to connect the dots between Phoenix and Dahlia, Mia, Godo, and so on. In addition, and this is obvious, but Bridge of the Turnabout functions as an ending to the Phoenix Wright trilogy as a whole. Do I believe that TNT does a good job at having an overarching plot? For the most part, yes. The Stolen Turnabout and Recipe for Turnabout have only a few minor details that really matter to the grander plot, but that's not a big deal to me. I appreciate the diversions from the main plot anyways. It keeps things fresh and not creatively dry. And now, let's cover all of the main characters we haven't yet. It's time to give everyone a proper analysis before they're absent later down the line. And man, how depressing is that? First up are my closing thoughts on Maya Fey. Oh, Maya. What can I say? Maya is the light of life everyone needs in their lives. She was a helpful assistant to Mr. Wright, and as I say that, I'm sure you're laughing at me. Joke's on you, though, because I'm not talking about an assistant to his work. Rather, she's a perfect friend for Nick to keep him company. Sure, she's not the best character of all time, or in this series, but there's a reason she resonates with so many fans and is seen as a key part of the trilogy. Whether it's her appreciation for what Diego Armando did to save her, or demanding that she goes to a burger joint, I'm always happy to have her around, which is the exact sentence I used to describe her in 3A number 1. Again, Maya isn't a character oozing with depth, but her peppy and emotional moments always add to the situation. Maya Fey is awesome, period. Now, my closing thoughts on Pearl. You have to feel bad for all of the things she's gone through. It's not fair that Pearl's mother is somebody we know as Morgan Fay. She doesn't deserve to have such an evil role model. She's also far too young to be able to handle events such as Maya being kidnapped or standing right in front of an assassin. Pearl is often used to heighten tension, but I don't see it as executed in a way that feels fake. These moments where you think about where she wandered off to or what will happen to her feel realistic to be thinking about for a child her age. On the bright side, her joyful attitude shows how strong she is. Pearl can handle her family's dark legacy and handle Phoenix's cases. She's such a strong kid. And when the situation isn't as dire, she's adorable. Closing thoughts on Misty Fay. There was so much mystery behind this person back in Turnabout's Sisters, but now I have realized how humble and loving she was. I've praised her in detail under her disguise as Elise Dionim earlier on, so I think I've covered her enough. Closing thoughts on Detective Gumshoe. The lovable man who works hard. I actually find Gumshoe to be very similar to Misty. Both characters go out of their way to help those in need, and both have a very kind heart. In addition, Gumshoe has other layers to peel back. I love the optimism as well as the realism he offers. He always distributes information the same way in court, which is kind of amusing. The good news about Gumshoe is about the depth he offers to the games is only in the moment. That's good news because that means I can finally finish this review already! Closing thoughts on Miles Edgeworth. I said in the JFA review that I won't backpedal on Edgeworth and Francisca and will only discuss their appearance in TNT, so I'm going to stay true to that. Edgeworth was a pleasure to have. His cooperation during Bridge of the Turnabout adds to his likability factor, and I think every player of the previous games wanted to try him out. With that said, he's pretty much what you'd expect post Justice for All, which is great for continuity purposes. And I can't forget that the Manfred von Karma Jr. in Case 4 was well done. His behavior was rude and cruel, and obviously adds to the tension of the case. Honestly, I think the best part about Miles Edgeworth in TNT is how he's always been connected to a huge surprise, one being Manfred von Karma Jr., and the other being the fraud defense attorney. Closing thoughts on Francisca. I'd like to point out that she has an attachment to trinkets, as seen in how she kept the card after Farewell My Turnabout, even though she never returned it for some reason. That's alright. Either way, her personality is as interesting as ever, and she's calmed down quite a bit since the airport confrontation in Justice for All. She still has her mannerisms of calling people by their full name, and everything like that, but the only problem with her is that she feels forced in her inclusion like Miles. Aside from that, I really liked how she assisted Phoenix during Case 5. Closing thoughts on Mia. Similar to Misty, I don't have much that I can add beyond what I praised about her during Turnabout Memories. I will say this. Developing a character who had little depth in the previous games was a smart move. This way the character can still carry along what made them interesting before, but expand upon it. The developers did exactly that, and I'm grateful. Mia deserves to be remembered as a determined soul who cared about justice more than anything. Closing thoughts on Godo. Mr. Diego Armando. Look, he's not even close to my favorite prosecutor in the series, but he's an excellently written character. Godo has understandable motives and clear depth in his behavior. He was changed by what Dahlia had done to him and what she did during his coma. But there's always that hint of Diego's confidence from Turnabout Beginnings in the Godo we saw at the end of the game. I can totally see why so many fans love him, and just like all of these characters, he really does deserve a lot of credit. Though he's held in too high of a regard if you ask me, but that's not really important right now. Closing thoughts on Phoenix Wright. I'm so proud of him. He is the one who has grown as a person and a lawyer the most. Phoenix Wright understands the law and understands the fear that clients have. He wants to defend Ron. Sure, Ron's kind of weird, but he wants to help him because he cares about justice just like his mentor. And that's another thing. Phoenix is heavily inspired by Mia, taking the good traits she had and dumping out the bad ones, while replacing them with a more passive-aggressive feeling during annoying moments. From a writing standpoint, he's a treat, designed to be relatable and likable. And as for analyzing the game overall, there's a prevalent theme of accepting the past and moving on, which is heightened by the past interest principle, as I will call it from now on. The mystery of the past provides curiosity and sparks questions, to which TNT answers in the present. However, simply doing this is not enough, and thankfully the game has a strong writing base and well-executed plot ideas. The past interest principle isn't enough to make a story stand as strong, and through this analysis, we've seen example after example of TNT going beyond basic implementation. I truly believe that this game deserves a lot of praise. However, you probably won't find it too odd for me to think that it's a bit overrated. I love Trials and Tribulations as much as the next guy, but I seriously can't crown it as the series' best. Heck, not even in the top 3. Through this analysis, I believe I've highlighted the flaws of the game, and you also probably wouldn't find it too odd for me to think that it's the most flawed in the trilogy. But people, the highs are at an all-time high in Trials and Tribulations, and I feel that the interesting direction, overarching plot, complexity, and so on outweigh the negatives, and give the game a slight edge to Justice for All. Alright, we are officially done with the specifics of Trials and Tribulations. Now, you know, I'm 100% solo on this Ace Attorney review series, but I did something almost unthinkable. Considering that this is the last time I get to focus on the original trilogy, I wanted to see what other people had to say. I reached out to my friend the Storyteller and I asked him if he would give me a paragraph summarizing his beliefs about TNT. He kindly took upon the request, so I'd like to give you his response to you now. It's always good to have multiple perspectives and ways of explaining a thought. I'll just provide some music while you read. Well, Storyteller, I want to thank you for contributing your thoughts to this video, and I have to agree 100% with what you said. TNT is indeed very much reliant on the previous 2 Ace Attorney games. In addition to the Storyteller's conclusion on TNT, I want to look at Batman 11838's opinion as well. Isaac is another great friend of mine who has been currently doing things away from Ace Attorney for the most part. Relations simply embodies a finale to a journey that was the Phoenix Wright trilogy. I know that sounds lame and generic in comparison to the others, but it's true and it is special. TNT finds ways to finish every character's development, even if that meant forcing some in the plot, and you know what? It does a good job. It creates a lot of world building. And if you think I was being serious in this video, I was. But now I have to go into full serious mode. Trials and Tribulations has a lot of magic surrounding it. I can't describe it as atmosphere, and no, I don't think I'm talking about the plot either. There's something magical about TNT, and it's in the entire game. Not just the finale, because it's so bittersweet. Everyone, could we just take one moment? You and I may disagree about many things that I've said in the last 3 reviews, and that's fine. But please tell me you think there's something magical about the experiences we have played in the Phoenix Wright trilogy. Please tell me I cannot be the only one. Again, whether we agree on a lot of aspects of the Phoenix Wright trilogy or not, we have got to agree that there's something special here. I just don't understand. What makes the original trilogy so magical? Yes, I exclaimed how each game offers something unique to itself, yet have overarching plots and connects, but still, come on, what is it? Maybe these magical experiences from the original trilogy are why these games are held the highest in regards compared to the rest of the series. Who knows, maybe some people just didn't find the same magic in Apollo Justice, or the Investigations games, or the 3DS games. But that's kind of unfortunate to hear. It's not their fault. How can a developer or writer physically create magic in a game and not another? It's simply impossible. Well, I've thought about this for a long time, and I believe I know it now, and I can share it to all of you. What's so magical about the original trilogy? It's the thrill of the courtroom drama, the down-to-earth interactions in the investigation segments, and the overall messages about finding the truth. This is what I will now refer to as the esteemed triangle of Ace Attorney. We appreciate these three elements the most because they add to the sense of belonging and world building. And you can bet we'll revisit this idea in every 3A onwards. We have concluded the analysis section. Well, that was Trials and Tribulations, and I am done. So I guess I won't be needing this copy for a while now. Now this is actually my original 2013 cartridge that I got at GameStop. You can even see the label. So, whew, man. By the way, Metroid Prime Trilogy. You should buy that. Just saying. And that marks the end of this analysis. Please stay until the very end of this video. Please, please, please. I still have lots of content packed into this video's end, including the credits, my special thanks, and my cool 3A end slate. If you've been watching the Ace Attorney Analyzation series, and you want to get more gaming analyses and other things, please subscribe to my channel. I would be thrilled to have you come along. Also, it's been beyond a pleasure to make this video for you Ace Attorney fans, as well as those IKG subscribers who stuck it out to the end. If you wish to support me, please check out my Discord server, which you can interact with me and others on, my Patreon, which you can donate to, but obviously please don't feel like you have to, nothing's locked behind it, or my Twitter, where I post updates and other funny stuff, which you can find links to all of that and more in the description. Also, I'm a part of Team Turnabout's production of Ace Attorney The Shield of Justice, which is a fan project. Links about that will be in the description as well. At the end of this video, I'll have links on screen to other grand reviews and other things I've done as well. Yeah, I know, there's a lot going on. Please share the 3A playlist with your friends and fill them in on what this review series is all about. I wish I could talk to you in this video forever, but I think it's time to let the rest of this cool stuff in the video do the talking, and I shut up. Well, it's been so much fun, it's been an honor, and thank you so much for supporting me, guys and girls. Goodbye, everyone.
We're no strangers to court. You know the rules, and so do I. A full acquittal's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy. I just want to tell you I believe you. No matter who takes the stand, never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run out of contradictions. Gonna expose each lie, gonna make the truth come to light, gonna make sure you get the right conviction. We've known each other for a day. I know you're innocent, but there's no evidence to prove it. Inside we both know what's been going on. We know the case